This is a virtual meeting using the Zoom platform. Members of the public can view this meeting live on Channel 8 or the city's website. Live Spanish translation services are being provided for tonight's council meeting by telephone. Please dial 720-386-9023 and use code 104091. If you are a council member, please be sure to have your video camera on and be mindful that we are streaming this meeting on Channel 8 and on our city's website. The chat function has been disabled to ensure that the public can see all portions of the meeting. The city clerk is the host of the meeting and I and our IT director will be the co-host. Council members and panelists will be able to unmute themselves when recognized. Please mute yourself when you have finished speaking to prevent disruptions. Members of the public who have registered to speak will be recognized at the proper time. Starting tonight, we will use roll call votes only when required by law or when requested by a council member or the clerk. Other votes will be voice votes counted by raising hands in the Zoom app or as the chair determines. If a member disagrees with the stated outcome of the vote or feels their vote was not properly heard, the member should immediately request a roll call vote. This time we'll call the meeting to order and ask the city clerk to call roll.
Mayor Huseman,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Present.
Councilmember Madera,
Present.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Present.
Councilmember Noble,
Present.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Present.
Councilmember Hurst,
Present.
Councilmember Grimes,
Present.
Councilmember Smith.
Present.
Mr. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. For the record, all members are present and accounted for. This time we'll move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Would like to invite those in the Zoom webinar to unmute their microphones and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance while the city clerk displays the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United
States of America
and
and to the republic which stands
one nation under God, indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, for joining on that. Modification of rules for public comment. All public comment will occur during citizen communication except for public hearings. Persons who registered to speak under multiple items will be allowed to speak multiple times. Public hearing testimony will occur during the public hearing portion of the meeting. Does any council member wish to move or to modify this practice? Seeing none, we will proceed to citizen comment. Per council policy, citizen communication is the time on our agenda for the public to address council on business and affairs of the city. The city council is not able to hear any comments at this time on land use matters that are before or may come before council. Please reserve such comments for the appropriate public hearing. As a reminder, council must wait until administrative council business to take action in response to citizen communication. The city needed advance registration in order to participate in citizen communication for this meeting. If you are currently in this meeting to speak during citizen communication, please listen for me to call your name and the clerk will unmute you so you may begin. If you do not respond or are disconnected, you may miss your chance to comment. Please give your name and address for the record and keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. Thank you. First on the agenda is Brooke Torres.
Brooke, if you are in the meeting and you can either hit *9 or on your phone or use the raise hand function in Zoom. Mayor Huseman, I do not see Brooke in the meeting.
Thank you. Next on the list is Max Daffron.
Max, if you're in the meeting, there he is. Click on the draw. Max, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Perfect. Can you hear me?
We can. Yep. You may proceed.
Perfect. Honorable Mayor and Council, my name is Max Daffron. I live at 10934 Ursula Street, Commerce City. That's in the Turnberry neighborhood off of 104th and Highway 2. I'm here. The last thing I want to be seen as with my citizen comments is criticizing or reprimanding the police department. However, we have a concern in our neighborhood of a significant amount of crime in the last little bit over a month and a half. We've had 2 cars stolen out of people's driveways, 2 neighborhoods' homes vandalized, 2 cars broken into in one case where they actually opened somebody's garage and went inside their garage and stole items. And then most recently, last week, we had somebody in our neighborhood who saw somebody breaking into his car and went out to confront them and had shots fired at them. All of these have been recorded to the Commerce City Police Department, and I get that things are tight with coronavirus. And however, these people are becoming more and more emboldened over time. And it's becoming a situation where it's creating a really dangerous precedent in our neighborhood. This is a neighborhood with an elementary school. There are a lot of children in this neighborhood. My wife and I moved here for the purpose of starting our own family, and we're excited to begin our own family here. And it's really unfortunate that our neighborhood has devolved into a case where if I see somebody breaking into my house, I have to be aware, and if I am going to confront them, I have to have a weapon on my person because there's a very good chance they're armed. We know for a fact these are similar groups. All of the most of the neighbors in this neighborhood have cameras, and it's always the same 1 or 2 vehicles driving up and down the street. And we're just really here to plead our case. I know another couple neighbors have signed up, hopefully for this meeting as well. But we really love our neighborhood, and we hate to see this happening. And we implore the city council and the police department to give our neighborhood a hand. And like I said, this is the Turnberry neighborhood just off of 104th and Highway 2. And it's pretty much the entire neighborhood is being terrorized by these people. Thank you. That sums it up for me.
Thank you, Mr. Daffron. Next on the agenda is Steve Douglas.
There's Steve. Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Just wanted to highlight, you guys talked about the South Platte crossing, and you guys had good information as far as what that would look like for the future of Commerce City, budget-wise and expense of just having that facility, even though it would have been a good thing for Commerce City, but the costs outweighed the project. And also going forward, you guys are going to be challenged here, either towards the end of this year, beginning of next year, by some big major developers. And based on your decision, you will be a big financial payoff for the developer, but it could put the city in the red. So I urge you to please make the right decision, because your decision may not impact the citizens of Commerce City in 2021 or 2022, 21, 22, but could be 4 years down the road. And the other thing too is, it would be nice if we can get an update on Dairy Queen. What's going on there? It looks like it's ready to. It could be open any day, but we're not getting any information at all from the city on the website or even in the newsletters. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the public were also able to submit comments online and by mail. No written comments were received by the deadline. If anyone wishes to speak at future council meetings, please check the meeting agenda and city website for information on how to register or submit written comments. Next on the agenda is presentations. We'll start with a COVID-19 update. Will Interim City Manager Roger Tinklenberg please provide an update on the city's overall response to the COVID-19 crisis?
Thank you, Mayor. Just real briefly give you an update. Staff continues to operate under the 2020 budget reductions, and we've reduced the number of employees to or that actually work in the office in our facilities because of the change in status for Adams County number of cases. And so we've been directed to reduce staffing levels down to 25%, pardon me. And so we've reduced the staff levels down to the skeleton number that are necessary to maintain operations and services. We are utilizing QLIS software for people to make appointments if they need assistance in person. And also the court is reducing their capacity as well. Cases are still high in Adams County. And so I anticipate that Adams County will stay at level 3 for the near future. In terms of our operations, staff continue to wear masks in our facilities, and we require mask wearing by visitors. We continue to publish information about a number of the programs that are available to assist members of the community, and that's included every week in this city manager update. Like I mentioned, just real briefly, community development, they're still staying very busy in spite of COVID-19. Economic development has been focused on the grants, and Ms. Blakeman will provide a substantial amount of information about the grants. Parks, Recreation, Golf, really the hottest topic there is they're continuing to work on the ambassador program for outreach. And for Public Works, they're continuing their fall maintenance operations, winterizing equipment and that type of thing. We did have raised level of concern among the staff in Public Works. The prior week, they had between 6 and 8 staff members quarantined because of exposure. Now this past week, that dropped down to 2 to 3. So thankfully that's going in the right direction. But again, we have to maintain vigilance. And those exposures occurred outside of work. So again, it's the personal contacts that are causing those type of issues. And in spite of missing a number of people, they've been continuing their routine daily operations for, again, fall maintenance type of work. Pardon me, sorry, my voice, I'm under the weather and so my voice is pretty weak. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy and she'll wrap it up for us. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm going to give you guys some information as it was submitted to Adams County about our grants. And so under the CARES Act funding, of the 4.6 that we originally had started with, the city has spent $2,362,000, and that's what's actually posted to the ledger. We know that a little more activity than that has happened, but that's as of the end of October. We know that there's an additional 1.4 million that's currently pending or estimated that is going to be spent. That includes that 1.1 million that council had approved for the community assistant programs. So the remaining dollars, which is 881,000, that can easily be absorbed with the public safety employee costs that are permissible for us to be reporting under those particular funds. So we're not concerned about spending the money that has actually been given to us, and we're trying to put as much of that as we can into the community. I'm going to break that down just a little bit. So under business assistance, we're in the 4th round of the business grants. And this last round, 24 grant applications were received to date. And again, that's end of October. And 13 grants have been awarded for a total of $144,500 this round. And 8 of those have gone to restaurants. And so we're continuing to take up applications until the end of this month. So we expect to see more coming in. As a matter of fact, I think at least one more came in this morning that we are aware of. And Economic Development is finalizing a COVID-19 resource guide for restaurants, and that's going to help inform the owners about operating guidelines, resources available, and ideas to boost business during the upcoming winter months at a reduced capacity. And then for the nonprofits, that was opened from October 28 to November 4. There were 11 applicants and 51,000 that was expended this round in those particular funds. That leaves us 24,000 that's available for during this round 4. And it looks like it will be opening again November 12 to November 17, or is open November 12 to November 17. And then for the family, senior, and child care grants, that opened on November 9, and that's going to be open until the 30th. And the city has received 12 applications so far to date, and I don't have the dollar amounts since they have just gotten approved last week, and the expenditures will be going out on that soon. So I'll let you know when that information is updated. And the last thing I have for you is that the judge has decided that he is going to start holding virtual meetings hearings beginning on 12/2. And so for those people that are not able to appear virtually, they still have an opportunity, if they don't have computer access, to be able to appear in person. They'll just set an appointment for that, and they'll still be able to come in and have their hearing in a timely manner. And also, per what Roger had stated, all department staffs are working to get themselves down to the minimum while still providing the best possible services that they can for our citizens. And with that, Mr. Mayor, I will hand it back to you. We're going to pass it back to you rather than go back to Roger.
Very well, thank you. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff regarding the COVID response?
I do. I can't find my hand. It's missing from my screen.
Go ahead.
Okay, apologize. My question is, of the $881,000 that is left, would there be a possibility of using any of that $881,000 for an emergency notification system, text messages, that kind of thing that people could sign up for? I am pretty discouraged for all of the effort that the staff has put into this and all of our hopes that so few people have applied for the funds. There's not a lot of applicants, and I think it's certainly not for lack of need, but for lack of knowledge.
And Roger, I'm going to let you handle a portion of that. I do know that they're still working through our systems to get further applications still to come in. But Roger, are you available to answer the question about being able to do the emergency notification system work?
Well, we certainly can check into that. I think one of the challenges will be timeliness, because we're supposed to have our money committed by the end of the month. Chief Nichols may have some information on that as well. Chief, are you there?
I am. Thank you, Roger. I've been working with AdCom since this request was made. They actually have a system. We're in the process of rechanging the guidelines regarding that. There is already a citizen notification system that runs through Code Red. We just have to alter some of the processes and protocols in order for us to use it. So that may be a system that's already in place that we won't have to purchase anything new. And it's being paid for by funds through AdCom. So I think that's the solution that we're going to be using on the horizon. I should have some more information in about 2 weeks.
I was thinking about it also in terms of pushing out information to people who are signed up on the notification system to know about the various grants, for example, or other important critical city business about COVID, for example, that wouldn't fall into the category of, an explosion or an accident or that kind of thing.
Again, we're still in the process of writing the guidelines. I think anything that may be public health may be able to qualify. To discuss city grants I'm going to go out on a limb and say that probably would not be prudent for this system.
We'll explore the concept at least.
Thank you both. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. I was gonna actually ask, could we call all our businesses with variable hour employees? Because, we share it on our social media. We let the people we know, but that is very minimal compared to how many businesses. When I asked for the list, there's 82 restaurants for Uber Eats, right? And I know we didn't have a list before until then, but I mean, I think it's a good time to start where we're having employees call restaurants, call businesses, because that's the number one reason they don't know about it. And it's very frustrating that the city doesn't have a list of all our businesses and restaurants that pay taxes into the city government, and we still can't just send them a postcard, or a phone call use employees that are laid off, or, VHS employees, or variable VHEs, not VHSs. So I'm just trying to think outside the box, because I sent that out, and a number of people, 2 businesses in my local neighborhood had no clue that we were on round 3. And they barely got on social media and saw my post, and they've been a business for forever. It's a mobile truck or whatever. But what could we do, Roger, to have some of those employees start calling businesses, restaurants, and saying, hey, I'm so-and-so from the city, we have this grant, could I email it to you? Everybody has an email, we just don't have that data.
We did do a direct mailing to all the businesses that we have, information on. So that has been done. We certainly can explore whether we have enough contact information to call businesses. So
And Michelle has been calling all the restaurants. Sorry, Roger.
Good, thank you.
What about when they pay their taxes to the city? Don't we have a list that we could do a large just email or a bulk text? They all pay taxes, so where can we use that list? Because that'll hit everybody.
Again, I'm gonna have to dig into that. I don't know the answer off the top of my head, sorry.
Thank you, Roger.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Roger and Kathy, for the update. I was just curious, with the shortage in PPE on the rise again, is that we see, does Commerce City employees have enough PPE available to them right now?
Yes, we've been successful in obtaining the safety equipment that's needed.
Okay, all right, thank you. Because that was just a concern for the ones that are out there in the field. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff regarding the COVID-19 update? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next presentation, which is in regards to Public Health Order 20-36. Will Clint Nichols, Chief of Police, please make the presentation?
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. In your packet was the actual Public Health Order 20-36. It changed as of November 2nd, and I'm just going to provide some highlights that are worth mentioning for the residents that are watching and for your pleasure. This public health order was issued on November 2nd, 2020, in response to the existence of thousands of confirmed and presumptive cases of coronavirus in 2019 and related deaths across the state of Colorado. This order implements levels of restrictions for individuals, businesses, and activities to prevent the spread of COVID-19 further in Colorado. As of November 2nd, and that's the date of the public health order, there have been 112,000 known cases of COVID-19 in Colorado. 9,000 plus Coloradans have been hospitalized, and over 2,000 Coloradans have died from COVID-19. Counties must implement the requirements of the relevant level of the COVID-19 dial for their jurisdiction as determined by CDPHE based upon scientific metrics established in the dial. And I'll talk about those in just a little bit. The COVID-19 dial consists of 5 levels that counties qualify for based on meeting 3 specific metrics. Counties will remain in a dial level so long as they continue to meet the metrics in that level. If the county falls out of compliance with one or more of the metrics associated with that level, they will have 2 weeks to develop and implement mitigation strategies to get back into compliance with the metrics. If after 2 weeks, one or more of the metrics remains out of compliance, the county must participate in a consultation with CDPHE to determine whether additional mitigation time and or mitigation strategies are warranted, or if the county must move to a lower level. And again, CDPHE reserves the right to move counties one or more levels more quickly as circumstances warranted. And as I mentioned before, there are 5 levels. Level green is protect our neighbor. Level blue is safer at home, but cautious. Level yellow is safer at home with concern. Level orange is safer at home, high risk. And level red is stay at home. Each color on the dial has metrics that must be attained before a county can move to the next level. Metrics include new cases, or how much the virus is circulating in a county, percent positivity, and that is whether there is sufficient COVID-19 testing to capture the level of virus transmission. And finally, the last metric is impact on hospitalizations. And that is a determination, are they increasing, stable, or declining? Each color on the dial also has restrictions placed upon them by the dial designated color. These restrictions include, but are not limited to, defining critical businesses, critical government functions, public and private gatherings, field services, indoor event requirements, personal services, limited healthcare settings, restaurants capacity, house of worship, and life rights services. It also includes recreation centers, organized recreational youth or adult league activities, and outdoor guided activities. So all of the varying levels have their different criteria for each of those categories as to what is allowed and not allowed. It should be noted that as of 1300 hours today, Adams County is currently in level orange, high risk. All metrics, at least from the previous 2 weeks cumulative incident rates, show us trending upwards. What that means, it paints a very drastic picture that if we don't move to the next higher level soon, we probably will if we don't start to develop some mitigation strategies at the county level. And on that note, again, that was just a overview of the information that's in the packet. It is much more detailed and in-depth as it came from the governor's office, and I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Are there any questions for Chief Nichols regarding the public health order? Councilmember Noble?
Thank you. You mentioned right at the tail end that it's up to the county. Did you mean the county or Tri-County Health?
It is the county has to work with CDPHE on the mitigation strategies.
Adams County itself?
That is
Because,
correct, yes, ma'am.
Because commissioners tell me that we as cities need to come up with our own mitigation strategies, that it's not up to the county. So now I'm confused. What are they telling you?
I believe that is a collaboration strategy that they're saying that if every, because what we're getting from the county is their mitigation strategies that they're asking us to adopt. And as long as we all enforce them, but because we're a home rule municipality, we can make a determination outside of what's required in the public health order. We can make some determinations as a city.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for Chief Nichols? Seeing none, we will move on. Thank you for your time this evening. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes items that are routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, and non-controversial. They are presented to council for a single motion and vote. Any member of council may ask to remove a specific item for further discussion and a separate vote. Tonight, there are 8 items listed under the consent agenda. The minutes that were continued from the November 2nd meeting are included on the consent agenda. Does anyone on council wish to remove an item off the consent agenda for further discussion? Councilmember Noble.
Yes, I have 3 items. The first one is fairly simple. The September 21st minutes have a clerical error in item 9 on the Council Economic Development Subcommittee motion. It's missing a seconder. The seconder was Councilmember Alan Thomas. So we simply need to amend the minutes and approve. I would like a voice vote on resolution 2029-90. And the third is resolution 2020-96 hazard mitigation plan. I'd like for us to receive a copy of the plan. And particularly because I had specifically asked for a discussion of hazard mitigations when we were talking about oil and gas regulations.
Okay, so we are pulling the minutes of September 21st, 2020, pulling resolution 2020-90 and resolution 2020-96.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other
Councilmember Noble,
council?
you stated you wanted 2020-90 pulled for a voice vote. Did you mean a roll call vote on that one? I just want to be clear.
Whatever is the system that the mayor explained at the beginning, my understanding was it sort of changed.
Yes, so for non-roll call votes, they would do voice votes. I just want to make sure you want a roll call vote
Yes,
on
I am.
2020-90.
Right. I am not in support of that measure, and I don't want to approve it through consent calendar.
Okay, that's what I need to know. Thank you very much.
Are there any other council members wishing to pull an item off of the consent agenda? Councilmember Noble, did you have something further to add?
I don't know. I don't know what you mean.
Your hand is up. Did you have something further to add?
No.
Thank you. Seeing no other requests to pull any other items, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as amended. Councilmember Alan Thomas,
I make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
and Councilmember Hurst.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda minus the September 21st meeting minutes, minus resolution 2020-90 and minus resolution 2020-96. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Noble?
No, thank you.
Seeing no requests for discussion, will the city clerk please read the titles and take a roll call vote?
Minutes of November 2, 2020, ordinance 2300, an ordinance enacting a new Article 4 and Chapter 9 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code to establish a temporary maximum fee that can be charged for third-party food delivery services in the city of Commerce City, Colorado. Resolution 2020-88, resolution authorizing intergovernmental agreement between Adams County and Commerce City regarding cost sharing for Dahlia Street Improvement Project. Resolution 2020-93, resolution appointing members to designated boards and commissions of Commerce City. Resolution 2020-94, resolution amending the City of Commerce City procurement policy. Councilmember Madera.
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola.
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank.
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes,
Passes 9-0.
thank you. All right, Councilwoman Noble, you wanted to pull the meeting minutes from September 21st as a clerical error. Would you like to make a motion to approve those amended?
Yes. I move to approve the minutes of September 21st as amended,
Councilmember
which
Madera?
corrects the seconder to Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Councilmember Madera?
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve an amended copy of the September 21st meeting minutes, which would add a seconder to the Economic Development Committee. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will take a voice vote. So if everybody can raise your physical hand in your window so I can count votes. And the motion passes 9-0. Next, you asked to remove resolution 2020-90. The floor is yours to discuss.
Yes, the South Adams County Water and Sanitation District's sanitary sewer or water lines go right through Ward 4. And I have constituents who are opposed to the pipelines running through Ward 4 along Second Creek rather than diverting around the border of Commerce City. In addition, in light of the conversation that we had with the professionals that were here at our last meeting when we discussed this, it's clear that none of this gets put down in South Denver. And it seems like it's quite time that Commerce City no longer be the pass-through for wastewater. So I am voting against this measure, and I am asking for a voice vote.
Councilmember Hurst.
Just to comment on that, I hear you on that one too. And thought that some of the questions that were answered kind of showed why it is that way, due to gravity, due to the way that the topography here works. And I talked to 3 separate homeowners in the area that back up to Second Creek, and they had their own set of concerns as well, obviously during construction phasing and things like that. When I was able to, spend a little bit of time with one of them, the other 2 kind of got some information from the third, but explaining to them the process taking place and kind of the setback of the construction and what's needed and why the alternative creates some risk and resiliency issues by adding too many mechanical pieces to the system and not relying on gravity. That's the real reason why I support this, is just the natural flow through the topography, the lack of the need for mechanical, pump lifts and things like that. Just the resiliency of that when you need it the most becomes in question. And so trying to find, obviously it's not preferred to go down Second Creek, but it's definitely seems to be the best way to reduce the risk in the worst situation. So I will be supporting that.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurst. Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, I had a question for staff. It seems like we're talking about the Metro project, which we were talking about at our last meeting, and this seems to be a different project, right? This is related to the South Adams County water. So is there anybody on staff who can clarify that?
Jason, are you available to answer that question?
Yes, sir. I just need to get brought over. Thank you, Dylan. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Pro Tem, and Council. Just to provide some clarification, the item that's before you today or tonight is not related to the Metro Wastewater Second Creek Interceptor conditional use permit discussion that was discussed at a previous council meeting. The request before you tonight is in support of a private development, Nexus North, which is located at the intersection of East 84th Avenue and Telluride Street off the Tower Road corridor. This is seeking to provide a connection to existing infrastructure within Second Creek for South Adams County Water and Sand, not Metro Wastewater.
Well, thank you very much. And I would like to thank Councilmember Madera for clarifying that for me. And I apologize to my colleagues for wasting your time right now. So we can go ahead since I pulled it off. Now we have to vote on it, but I will vote for it in that case. Thank you. And I apologize again.
Councilmember Hurst.
No, I just knocked everything down. I think I hit my hand on accident.
I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve resolution 2020-90. Councilmember Hurst. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
So moved. Sorry.
So you want me I'll second it.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve resolution 2020-90. Is there any request for discussion? Seeing none, we will do a voice vote again. Please physically raise your hand.
Mayor Huseman, may I read the title real quick?
Oh, absolutely. My apologies.
That's okay. Thank you very much. Resolution 2020-90, resolution authorizing grant of easement to South Adams County Water and Sanitation District for sanitary sewer or water pipelines.
Thank you. And at this time, please raise your physical hands if you're voting in favor of this. And the motion passes 9-0. Next up is Resolution 2020-96. Councilmember Noble, you have the floor.
Okay. I think I read this one right. This is hazard mitigation plan with Adams County. I understand that this is basically pro forma, but it's a very important topic that we in Commerce City need to discuss. We have Superfund sites, we have Suncor, we have the Arsenal, we have existing and potential oil and gas. We have questions about issues with water. Several things. We had earthquakes years ago that led to $1 million worth of damage in North Commerce City before there was any residential up here. So I wish for this to be a separate topic, agendized for another meeting so that we can have a full conversation about hazard mitigation and what's included in this plan and in Annex C.
Thank you. When I read the legislative text on this, it references a presentation given earlier in the meeting by Chief Nichols. So Chief Nichols, would you please address what this is in reference to?
Thank you, Mayor. We actually have the consultant that completed the mitigation plan. He's online. His name is Scott Field. If Dylan can move him over, I will turn the floor over to him. He's in the best position to answer those questions for you.
I have moved Scott over. Scott, you should be able to unmute yourself whenever you're ready.
Hey, good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. Can you hear me?
We can,
Okay.
yes, Scott.
Excellent, thank you. So my name is Scott Field. I'm a consultant with Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions here in Denver, and I'm the project manager for the consultant team hired by Adams County to help update this plan. And just to clarify, this hazard mitigation plan is completely separate from the COVID-19 mitigation measures that the chief was addressing earlier. This is an all hazards plan. It is a multi-jurisdictional plan, which means it's done at the county level, but involved a multi-jurisdictional planning team, including Kirk Dominic, the Commerce City Emergency Manager, was the primary representative for Commerce City. It is, I wouldn't say it's a pro forma plan, but it is something that's been, has been approved by FEMA. The purpose of the plan is severalfold. First of all, it identifies what hazards, what natural and human caused hazards are likely to cause damage or injuries in Commerce City and in Adams County, and then identifies strategies for what to do about them and how the communities can reduce their risk from those hazards. And then it's also one of the other purposes of it is to retain eligibility for FEMA grants. There's a number of hazard mitigation grant funds that are available through FEMA, and one of the requirements under the Disaster Mitigation Act is that a jurisdiction have a FEMA approved mitigation plan. So that is the overall purpose of this plan. As I said, it was developed using a multi-jurisdictional planning team, including representatives from Commerce City. It addresses a number of natural and human caused hazards, including thunderstorms, tornado and damaging wind, winter weather, floods, dam failure or incident, drought, hazardous materials incidents, earthquake, land subsidence, wildfire, terrorism or active shooter incidents, as well, and cyber incidents. And goes into, again, tries to quantify what the risk is from each of those hazards and identifies strategies to deal with them. So that's the purpose of the plan that we're asking you to approve. And I understand the council members, the council member wanting to see the plan before, so I'll have to defer to staff on that. But I'm happy to answer any questions you might have tonight.
Thank you, sir, for giving that explanation. Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much for that summary. I would, however, like this to be a presentation. Commerce City is a very unique community and has several of those hazards in the community. I have lived in another community previously with multiple hazards as well. So it's really critical for our residents to actually be able to hear what we're talking about for this area and what's planned for it. I appreciate you being here tonight, but I would like this agendized for another evening when we can actually have the plan in our packet and have a presentation on it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, am I to understand the plan should have been included in the packet?
It's not the only thing we have in the packet is the resolution for adopting it, as well as legislative text that talks about it, but the actual plan itself is not there. So,
okay, we'll have to check with my staff. That should have been made a part of the packet. I apologize for that.
I'd like to make a motion to continue resolution 2020-96 to a study session where council can be briefed by staff regarding the particulars of the plan, and that information can be made public before council votes on it. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to continue resolution 2020-96 to a study session. Is there any request for discussion? Seeing none, we will follow the same protocol of a voice vote. Please raise your physical hands in your window so I can count the votes. I am missing one, I believe. Oh, there you are. Okay. Motion passes 9-0. Sorry about that. I could not see Councilmember Hurst for a moment. That concludes the consent agenda. We will move on to public hearings. First public hearing is ordinances AN-257-20 and Z-965-20 for the annexation of property generally located at 10550 Brighton Road. I will remind council to use the public hearing only to ask questions, but not to express opinions or indicate how you will vote. Council members are not to provide testimony if you wish to participate in the decision. Rely only on the facts developed in this hearing and in the record and apply those facts to the criteria in the Land Development Code. This time I will open the public hearing and invite Andrew Baker, City Planner, to make the presentation.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Ms. Mayor Pro Tem and all the council members for being here this evening. I will go ahead and share my screen and begin the presentation. Okay, my name is Andrew Baker. I'm here on behalf of Commerce City Community Development Department. I will be presenting case AN 25720, Z96520, and NIGID 17720. This is for the Platt Place project, which is located at 10550 Brighton Road. We have the applicant with us here tonight, Dan Sheldon from UDC Miller. And this is a request for an annexation, a zoning to R1, as well as an inclusion into the Northern Infrastructure General Improvement District. The Annexation Act eligibility states that City Council has adopted a plan for the area to be annexed pursuant to the Colorado Revised Statutes, Section 31-12-105(1)(e). At least 1/6 of the area to be annexed is contiguous with the existing boundaries of the City of Commerce City. Please excuse there was a typo with those parentheses right there. But it does have those annex. It is contiguous, at least 1/6 to the current city boundaries. Community of interest exists between the areas proposed to be annexed and the City of Commerce City. The areas proposed to be annexed are urbanized or will be urbanized in the near future. The areas proposed to be annexed are integrated or capable of being integrated with the City of Commerce City. And all of the owners of the land to be annexed have signed the petition for the annexation. No annexations proceedings have been effectively commenced for any of the land proposed to be annexed to any other municipality. The proposed annexation will not result in the detachment of area from any school district and the attachment of such area to another school district. The annexation petitions meet the requirements of law. Once again, please excuse my typo with that parentheses there. There are no pending submissions that need to be made. The proposed annexations will not have the effect of extending the boundaries of the city of Commerce City more than 3 miles in any direction from any point of such boundary in 1 year. The entire width of any street or alley proposed to be annexed is included in the annexation. And finally, all requirements of the Colorado Revised Statutes, section 31-12-104, 31-12-105, and section 30 of Article 2 of the state constitution have been satisfied with respect to this annexation. The request is an annexation and zoning of 2 properties from Adams County Zone R1C to the Commerce City Zone District R1, which is our single family detached residential district. The project size is just a little bit over 13 acres. There's a comprehensive plan designation of residential low density, which allows a density of 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre. These 2 properties are to be re-subdivided into 48 lots and 4 tracts. The applicant is also applying for NIGID inclusion, which is approval is pending later tonight by the NIGID board. And staff is currently reviewing concurrent subdivision and development plan applications for these 48 single family homes. The site is located north of 104th Avenue and east of Brighton Road. It's going to be just south of the Bell Creek neighborhood. As I had mentioned, the comprehensive plan shows this area as residential low, which would be the same as the already developed neighborhoods that are in Adams County to the south and to the west, known as the Hazeltine neighborhoods. Little aerial view of the site. It's currently undeveloped. You can see that there are some existing roadways that are connecting through there, as well as some trees. And what you're seeing is also pad sites from a previous mobile home park that was on the site. But as you can see, it's vacant now. On each of those views, you can see some of the trees that are in the center of the property. It does slope down towards the west a bit. As I had mentioned, it was formerly a mobile home site. Those were removed several years ago, and it has been vacant since. There will be no connection to the Bell Creek neighborhood. 105th Avenue connection would require a floodplain crossing. And so in order to meet the fire department's requirements of having 2 access points, the main access to the development will be off of Brighton Road. That will be a right in, right out, along with a connection to the existing stub out on Yosemite Way to the south. This neighborhood is to be named Platt Place, and they will establish their own HOA, which will be responsible for maintaining the open space and drainage areas. As I had mentioned, this project is to be included in the Northern Infrastructure General Improvement District, pending approval from the NIGID board later tonight. And the eventual home builder will be Richmond American Homes, which was the same builder who built out the Bell Creek neighborhood to the north and to the east. Staff has found that the proposed R1 zoning is appropriate for this site because it is the most comparable classification to the current county zoning. Everything from density to lot size is almost exactly the same as what's currently allowed now. That density is also similar to what you see in adjacent developments and what is allowed by the comprehensive plan. Right-of-way will be dedicated along Brighton Road. There's also a financial contribution to a future traffic light at the 104th Avenue and Brighton Road intersection, along with other public improvements that have been negotiated in a pre-annexation agreement with the city. We did a neighborhood meeting that took place virtually on July 8th. I believe it was the first virtual neighborhood meeting that the city did. I thought that it actually went very well. There was lots of issues raised. We had a good turnout, lots of discussion with the neighbors. Some of these were vehicle access to the Bell Creek and Hazeltine neighborhoods, as well as traffic impacts to Brighton Road. Storm drainage and impact on sewer system capacity were also discussed, as well as wildlife and tree mitigation, and some perimeter fencing. And the applicant and staff followed up with several of the neighbors, and I felt we came to a good conclusion on all of these issues. Some of those led directly into where our access is now, and some of the design choices that have taken place since. All the required public notification was sent out pursuant to the Land Development Code. A postcard was mailed to all property owners within 500 feet. Publication was made in the Commerce City Sentinel Express, and 2 signs have been posted on the property as well. In accordance with the Land Use Development Code, zoning of newly annexed land must meet one of these 3 criteria. The zoning is most compatible with the city's comprehensive plan designation, and the zoning is most compatible with county zoning of the property at the time of annexation. So as I mentioned before, it meets both of those. As the property is vacant right now, that last criteria is non-applicable, but by meeting those 2, we meet our criteria for the annexation of newly zoned land. So staff recommends that the City Council vote to approve this annexation request. On October 6th, the Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward this request to City Council for approval as well. City staff and the applicant are available to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you for your time.
Councilmember Guardiola.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I do. I got a question, and you went over it. What kind of, it says other public improvements are being talked about negotiating on Brighton Boulevard. Brighton Boulevard from 104th all the way to 120th has been a street that we've discussed since I've been on council, 3 years. And I know we've put some money in to help fix it, and I know they've talked to the county to take it over, but that street is horrible. I mean, it is in bad shape. And what are we talking about here, and how are we going to improve that? Because these residents are going to move in here, and their cars are just going to be bumpy. It's a bumpy road. It's a really bad road. So what are we looking at, and what kind of talks are we talking about, or what kind of improvements are we talking about? Because it's a long stretch, and that to the map, and I live right behind there, is, the map is just a small portion of that street that our residents are going to have to drive in and out.
Brighton Road is currently under reconstruction right now.
But it's not fully reconstruction, right? It was kind of like, in my recollection, it's just kind of putting a Band-Aid over it because it was going to cost a lot more, right?
No, it's basically a reconstruction of the roadway itself, so it should be in good shape once that work is done.
Okay. And so what is the other then? What are they going to provide then? Since they're going to bring in how many more homes, how many more vehicles? So
they're contributing to, well, they're building a XL decel lane, as I understand it. They're also contributing to the improvements at the intersection of Brighton Road and 104th Avenue.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff regarding this item? Seeing none, would like to invite the applicant to make your presentation.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council. My name is Dan Sheldon with United Development Companies, 6900 East Bellevue Avenue, Suite 300, Greenwood Village, Colorado, 80111. We're super excited to be developing the Platte Place subdivision in Commerce City and are also excited about other projects that we're bringing through the city soon as well. I'd like to thank the planning and engineering staff, the interim city manager, Tinklenberg, and Director of Community Development, Rogers, for their efforts over the past year on this project. Mr. Baker has done a great job tonight with his presentation. While I do have a very similar PowerPoint presentation available, and me and my entire team, including engineers, planners, traffic engineers, and my home builder are all available and present right now on this Zoom call. Unless you have any specific questions for us, we are satisfied with the presentation that Mr. Baker has made. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Noble.
Mr. Sheldon, I'm curious as to why you want to be annexed by Commerce City and what the benefits are for you, because you'll be a bit of a peninsula surrounded on three sides by unincorporated Adams County and a neighborhood to the south that's unincorporated Adams County. So I was quite curious.
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilwoman Noble. In fact, we started this project over a year ago processing in unincorporated Adams County. And we went in and pre-apped and we started our submittals with them. And one of the first comments we got back from the outside referrals was from South Adams County Water and Sand, and they said they think that there was a SIA out there, Subdivision Improvement Agreement, or an IGA, an intergovernmental agreement between South Adams, the county, and the city that included areas that were served by infrastructure installed by the Northern Infrastructure, GID, would need to annex into Commerce City. And so we quickly set up calls and meetings with Mr. Tinklenberg, Ms. Axmaker from your office, from your planning department, and confirmed that. And sure enough, we were told roughly a year ago right now, maybe 10, 11 months ago, that we needed to annex. So we planned on bringing it into the county. We thought it'd be a very easy process for us to do that and stay simple. It turns out that our land plan, our lot sizes, our unit count, the product that our builder intends on putting in is all exactly the same. We're just going to be in your great city as opposed to in the county.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant regarding this item? Seeing none, I do thank you for being here to answer questions, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Gibson, did anyone register to speak on this matter?
Mayor Huseman, no members of the public registered to speak on this item and no written comments were received by the deadline.
Very well. One last time before I close the public hearing, is there anyone with any questions for staff or the applicant? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. At this time, I'm looking for a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2020-81. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to adopt resolution 20-81.
Councilmember Hurst.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt resolution 2020-81. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem.
Never mind, forgot to put my hand down, sorry.
Councilmember Noble.
No discussion, thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no request for discussion, we will take a roll call vote. Oh, actually, my apologies. We got to do a voice vote. Once again, let's raise your hands if you're in favor of this. And 1, 2, 3, and the motion passes 9-0. Thank you. Next, I am looking for a motion and a second to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission on case AN-257-20 and case Z-965-20. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission on case number AN-250-20 and case number Z-965-20.
Councilmember Hurst.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we will take a voice vote again. Please use your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the motion carries 9-0. Next, I'm looking for a motion and a second that the City Council introduce and approve ordinance AN-257-20 on first reading by council as seated. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to introduce and approve ordinance AN-250-20 on first reading by council as seated.
And Councilmember Hurst.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to introduce that the City Council introduce and approve ordinance AN-25-20 on first reading by council as seated. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst.
We can discuss how I forgot to put my hand down.
Seeing no requests for discussion, we need to take a roll call vote. So Mr. Gibson, would you please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance AN-257-20, an ordinance annexing certain unincorporated territory known as Platte Place Annexation, generally located at 10550 Brighton Road, Henderson, Colorado, pin 72109400015 and 72109400016 to the City of Commerce City, Colorado. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
Yes,
passes 9-0.
thank you. And at this time, I'm looking for a motion and a second that City Council introduce and approve ordinance Z-965-20 on first reading by council as seated. Mayor Pro Tem.
Motion to introduce and approve ordinance Z-965-20 on first reading by council as seated.
Councilmember Hurst.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to introduce and approve ordinance Z-965-20 on first reading by council as seated. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance Z-965-20, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance and zoning map of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by zoning the property annexed as Platte Place from Adams County R1C to Commerce City R1 and approving a zoning document. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
Yes,
passes 9-0.
thank you. Next on the agenda are ordinances on first reading. The first ordinance is ordinance 2301, recognition of bulletproof vest grant. Is there anyone on council that has any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2301. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I make a motion to approve ordinance 2301 on the first reading.
Councilmember Hurst.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2301. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2301, an ordinance amending the 2020 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Bulletproof Vest Partnership Grant Funds in the amount of $14,400 for the Bulletproof Vest Program in the Police Department and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
Yes.
passes 9-0.
Thanks, sir. Next up is ordinance 2302, recognition of a LEAF program grant. Is there anyone on council who has any questions for staff? Councilmember Hurst.
I apologize. I was going to motion to approve.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, I just had one question for Chief Nichols. I was curious, have there been any DUI checkpoints conducted in Commerce City in the last 2 years?
Thank you, ma'am, for the question. I am sure they have, but I can't, off the top of my head, recall when and where. I do remember we do have an overtime grant funding from Colorado State Patrol that allows us to do DUI checkpoints, and I have seen the bills come across for that. So I am almost positive that we have. I just couldn't determine how many off the top of my head.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Are there any other questions for staff regarding this ordinance? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve ordinance 2302. Councilmember Hurst.
Motion to approve ordinance 2302 on first reading.
Councilmember Grimes.
I'll second the motion.
Have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2302. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst.
No, I just think, you know, there's a comment about why I support it really, but obviously for good reason, the Department of Transportation and the State Patrol want us to not only enforce on major roadways, but the kind of arterial roads that feed those. And so this is a huge portion towards moving to a safer transportation system in our town.
Thank you for that. Will the city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2302, an ordinance amending the 2020 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Colorado Department of Transportation Grant LEAF program in the amount of $9,995 for DUI enforcement efforts and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
Yes.
passes 9-0.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is ordinance 2303, recognition of community development block grant funds. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2303. Councilmember Hurst.
Motion to introduce and approve ordinance 2303 by council as seated.
Councilmember Grimes.
I'll second the motion.
Have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2303. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst.
No, my hand was still up.
Seeing no request for discussion, will the city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2303, an ordinance amending the 2020 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Community Development Block Grant Funds through the CARES Act Phase 3A funding in the amount of $220,453 and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
Yes,
passes 9-0.
thank you. Next on the agenda is ordinance 2305, the East 108th Avenue paving project. Will interim city manager Roger Tinklenberg please make the presentation?
Dylan, could you pull up the presentation, please?
Yes, sir. Give me just one moment and let me know whenever you want me to move to the next slide.
All right. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is an overview of the upcoming development at 108th and Havana. And then I'm asking you for an appropriation. Go ahead and move on to the next slide. These stars are an approximation of the location. As I noted in the previous slide, this is located at 108th Avenue in Havana. So for those of you who know where Glen Murray's farm is, east of Havana Street, between 108th and 112th Avenue, this would be across the road to the south, on the south side of 108th Avenue. Next slide, please. There's two properties on the south side of 108th Avenue. The first property has been purchased by IOV, and then the second property to the east of that is being purchased by Huntington. It's approximately 20-acre development with visibility from I-76, and they're proposing to build 4 industrial buildings that will be for lease. And those buildings range in size from 30,000 square feet to 120,000 square feet for a total of almost 274,000 square feet. They want to make improvements to 108th Avenue for access into their campus. And under the development agreement, Huntington is responsible for the south one half of the road that would front along their property, and IOV is responsible for the south one half of the road that fronts on their property. Huntington has reached an agreement with IOV, and they will be improving the road. But as you know, it doesn't make sense to improve half of a road. So the other half would normally be the responsibility of the property owner to the north. However, we do not have a mechanism to cause that to happen. In other words, we don't have a means of requiring Mr. Murray to contribute to the project. Next slide, please. So the road currently is in unimproved condition. In other words, no curb gutter, landscaping, no hard surface. Huntington has requested that the city help with this road work since it would benefit several property owners, as well as future development on the Murray Farm site. This would, basically remove the need for the city to improve the road in the future. And their initial request was for the city to fund the north half of the road and basically have a reimbursement agreement by reimbursing fees and taxes and that type of thing. And quite honestly, I had a mistake on this. I had forgotten that we had a conversation 11 months ago, in other words, January of 2020, where this had been discussed. And so I went into a meeting last week and said, this is getting really messy. It's not something I agreed to. And he correctly pointed out to me that, yes, we had agreed to it. So I said, okay, this is a project that I really need to take to city council then. Because the north half of the road will cost approximately $584,000. Next slide, please. Under the charter, I have the authority to move money around within the capital improvement program within that fund. However, this is a new project, and given the amount of money, I felt it was best to take it to you as city council for purposes of transparency. As I mentioned, we don't have a process or code language that would allow us to seek reimbursement for the improvements made by future developers. And in addition, we cannot be a party to a private cost sharing agreement. So for this project, there's no tool to comply the property owner, as I mentioned earlier, to contribute to the cost of the improvements on the north half. So obviously this illustrates the need for us to update city council, our city policy, and that'll be presented to council at a later date. Next slide, please. So my recommendation to you is to approve the ordinance to amend the budget to transfer an appropriate $584,271 from the general fund balance and move that to the capital improvement fund for improving and paving the north one half of East 108th Avenue. Any questions on that?
Councilmember Noble.
I have a couple of questions. I believe that the map that was part of this presentation shows the star at the corner of the Arsenal.
Yeah, that was very approximate. It's hard to position those on.
Well,
the
108th would be
north.
North of
Right.
104th.
That's why I said, don't pay attention to really where they are. It's just
Okay.
general approximation.
So in fact, this road is for the project that the Aberdeen residents have been to council. It's
No.
not next to that. It's not that one.
No.
I'm seeing the Mayor Pro Tem said shake too. She lives in that area, so I'll trust her for sure on that one. I trust you too, but.
Thank you.
Okay, but I don't understand where it is then. Havana
north.
comes,
It's north of I-76. And if you're on 112th Avenue, and you turn south onto Havana, there's a segment of road there from 112th down to 108th. And on the east side is the Murray Farm. On the west side is the Brennan Investment Group improvements where they're putting in large industrial buildings. And then south of 108th Avenue is where IOV is next to Havana. And just east of that on 108th Avenue is the Huntington property for this proposed improvement.
so if the city doesn't make these kinds of contributions to future developers, why would we do it in this case?
I'm not sure the basis for the premise of your question. We do contribute to projects where we don't have developers on both sides of the road, or in some cases, developer will improve, for example, Chambers Road, south of 104th Avenue. One half of that road was improved by the developer, but it was improved in a 2-lane configuration, whereas in the future it'll be wider. So again, depending on the situation, we do participate where it's necessary to build out a road. Another illustration would be 112th Avenue next to the golf course, where the Reunion Metro District paved half of the road and we paid for paving the other one half. So this is a situation that arises every once in a while where we need to participate.
There was a bullet point in the presentation that spoke to this and why you were bringing it to us.
Yeah, we don't have a mechanism, as I mentioned, to require Murray Farms to contribute at this point because they're not developing. And we do want to establish a policy that does give us a mechanism to, get a contribution from the other party, but we don't presently have that type of policy or regulation in place that would require such a contribution.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thanks for the presentation, Roger. I understand we don't have a mechanism in place in a formal way, but has Murray Farms been approached about the possibility of contributing to this road improvement?
My understanding is that Huntington had a discussion with them. I've had a general discussion with Mr. Murray, and there's a larger issue that we will need to resolve, and that's the drainage through that area. So I intend to revisit the drainage issue with Mr. Murray, but I did not ask him regarding the farm, or I'm sorry, regarding the road improvement, just simply because my understanding was that has already been discussed with him, and there's no mechanism for us to require it.
Is the drainage part and parcel of the road improvement?
To a limited extent, yes, but really the drainage is a larger issue for the entire, from the Platte River east, southeast, all the way into Ragweed Draw in that area.
That was good information. Let me ask it a different way too. Do we have to make improvements to the drainage to improve the road?
Well, these two properties, IOV and Huntington, have to make drainage improvements, which will go alongside the road, is my understanding, but I'm not the engineer, unfortunately, and so I can't tell you specifically what that will look like.
That's okay. I ask only because I'm curious if the dollar amount that's presented tonight includes any contribution the city would need to make towards drainage improvements as well, or are we excluded from those improvements?
There's drainage improvements related to the road improvement, yes, but not the larger drainage, for that entire basin. Does that answer your question?
Almost.
Okay.
Bear with me. So will there be additional costs then, or does the figure presented tonight capture the city's contribution towards the drainage improvements related to the road improvement?
Related to the road improvement, yes, but again, there's going to be a larger solution that will come later for the basin-wide improvements.
Okay.
So sort of yes, and there will be more later, for the larger drainage improvements.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I understand that this is a necessary thing to do. I just want to make sure we're not approving something now that's going to cost us a lot more later that we weren't aware of, and kind of put ourselves in that position where we don't have a choice but to approve funds later.
That's a valid question. My understanding is the answer is no, because the larger drainage improvements have to happen irregardless of this road improvement. We are making, part of this project involves drainage associated with the road, and then the two development companies are taking care of the drainage from their properties. So again, we're resolving drainage for the immediate situation, but it does not resolve the drainage for the entire basin, if that makes sense.
It does. Thanks, Roger.
Okay.
Councilmember Madera.
So is this stretch of 108th on the east side of Havana, or
yes,
on the west?
It's on the east side, yes.
And so is Murray Farms the only neighbor to the north?
That's correct, yes.
Because I'm struggling a little bit just because, this really doesn't provide any benefit to Murray Farms. I mean, they've been there for, longer than the city's been in existence, and, they haven't had any problem with access the way things were currently configured. So, their argument here that this is going to provide a future benefit is assuming that Murray Farms sells and someone else develops that. So I guess, why didn't they come to us earlier?
Well, let me answer the first part first. Murray Farms is exploring developing, so that would mean a sale of the farm. And at that point, there would be access on the south side that's been improved already for that future development. Now, what that development will look like, we don't know yet. But I think it's safe to assume that part of the access into that property will be along 108th Avenue, just because of the size of the farm. In terms of, shoot, no, I forgot your second part, the question actually. Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, my second part of my question was, why didn't they approach the city earlier?
Well, they've been in discussions with staff for at least, since January of this year. I don't recall when it all started. And initially, the negotiation was in terms of reimbursement for the north half, using reimbursement of fees and taxes. And as we got further and further into this started looking messier and messier from my standpoint, anyway, my viewpoint. And that's why I decided to change direction and come to you for an appropriation. And that just happened last week. So, honestly, part of it's my fault.
So, when it comes to, Irondale, we get development there, and, it seems like we don't have these types of arrangements to improve the roads over there. So do we do this for all developments where the roadways might not be sufficient to handle what that proposed business is going to be?
Yes, and in Irondale, when there are developments that are occurring, improvements to property, we do require a development agreement or a public improvement agreement where they contribute for the half of the street that fronts their property. So it's a very similar type of situation. And for example, I think right now we're working on, if I remember right, 86th Avenue, which has one or more of these type of agreements in place.
Okay. And then, shoot, now I forgot my last question for you.
Sorry.
Thanks, Roger.
Okay.
Councilmember Noble.
How long would it take to recoup $584 million from these 4 warehouses in terms of revenue to the city?
It's 584,000, and
sorry, that's better.
And that will be recouped with the fees and taxes. So it would be as soon as the 4 buildings are built.
Do we need to have the legislation that you're talking about, that any future development would contribute as well? Any property owner with potential future development would contribute as well? Do we need that legislation?
Yes, if council agrees with having that type of a policy in place, then yes, it would require city council legislation.
Do we need it now before we decide?
We would not be able to put that into place in time for allowing this development to move forward. So that's a future topic for us to, we're going to have to do some research and noodle on that with the city attorney's office and bring that to you for a future consideration.
Okay, and just one final question. Is there any road that won't be done because we're doing this now?
I'm not sure I understood that.
If we approve this and use funds for this road, 584,000 in funds for this road, will there be any road that's on your list of priorities that won't be done because we're now using this money for a road?
No, that's why that was the other part of the reason I decided to come to city council to ask for this appropriation, because this would move money out of our general fund balance and not use existing money in the CIPP fund.
One other question. If this agreement had not been made with the developer last November, would there be anything different about what's coming before us right now?
No, this is, I would have to say that this is typical of these type of developments where, again, where the development's not occurring on both sides of the road, then, it places the city in a situation where if we want the development to proceed, and this is a case where we definitely want that development to proceed, that we have to step up and basically, enter into an agreement to participate in the cost of the project.
Would this have been typically in our budget that we just worked on?
Yes. The original concept, though, that we were working on was a reimbursement agreement, which wouldn't have required an appropriation, but it would have required city council approval of the reimbursement agreement, which would basically be I forget what you call those things, but it's a development agreement that we would have had to enter into. So it would have required some type of a city council action.
And it would have included our $584,000, whether it was a reimbursement or the other version.
Yes. So the reason I decided to go this way is related to speed. A reimbursement agreement, like I say, it can get really sticky trying to figure out, how to structure it. And as of the negotiations were taking time to try to work that out, that's why I made the decision let's just go with an appropriation instead to make it cleaner and quicker.
Councilmember Hurst.
I had my hand up, but I think Roger did a very good job answering my questions through the series of answering the other council members' questions. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other council members with questions for staff regarding this item? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2305. Councilmember Hurst.
A motion to approve by councilors, to introduce and approve by council seating ordinance 2305.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I'll second that.
Have a motion and a second to introduce by council seated and approve emergency ordinance 2307. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst.
Sorry about that.
Seeing no request for discussion, will the city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote? And as a reminder, because this is an emergency ordinance, it will require 7 yes votes to approve it.
Ordinance 2307, an emergency ordinance of the City of Commerce City, Colorado, amending section 21-3210 of the Land Development Code.
Mayor.
Phase. Oh, go ahead.
Are
Mr.
we on the
Shipley.
budget ordinance 2305 or 2307?
I'm sorry, I misread that. So yes, this is just a regular ordinance.
Thank you for the catch, Robert. Ordinance 2305, an ordinance amending the 2020 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by transferring $584,271 from the general fund to the CIPP fund for costs associated with the East 108th Avenue North 1/2 east of Havana Street paving project and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
Yes.
passes 9-0.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to the emergency ordinance. I apologize about that mistake earlier. This is ordinance 2307, an emergency ordinance on land development code amendments. Will Mr. Sheasley and Mr. Rogers please make the presentation?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Good evening. I'm formally here to talk about the emergency ordinance now. Jason will jump in, I believe, to talk the policy reasons behind this, and I'll talk over the mechanics. Very briefly, I want to touch on the nature of emergency ordinances. I think this is one of the first the council's seen. Under the Commerce City Charter, emergency means you need 7 votes. Emergency doesn't necessarily mean that there has to be an actual emergency that you put it next to. It is something that allows the city to move quickly on something that requires an ordinance to enact, if the council makes declarations that are set forth in this ordinance, which are done so here. So I don't want people to necessarily worry about it being called an emergency ordinance when we're talking about a zoning question, essentially, or building permits. Can we bring up the presentation, please? This ordinance, while we're doing that, this ordinance came up very last minute, and I believe the Jason can speak to this. The desire to have it approved as an emergency ordinance, if council will do so, is to enable its implementation quickly. Next slide, please. Right now, the Land Development Code covers building permits essentially, and it requires that the building permit be compliant with all other codes and regulations of the city, including zoning or existing plats. What we are proposing here is to allow, with the community development director's approval, the building official to issue partial building permits for large non-residential projects over 250,000 square feet in the aggregate for building square footage, where based on the existing plat or inavailability of complete plans, otherwise couldn't be permitted. We had some projects come along and they need more flexibility because of their size or complexity. Some of them require that projects reach a certain phase before their financing can be implemented. And it runs a risk, if we don't have flexibility, that certain economic development prospects can seek to do their business elsewhere. And so that's the root cause here that Jason can address more if you have questions specifically on it. Next slide, please. And just to note, you don't have to go back, but we are talking about very limited circumstances where a project is coming in and they need the foundation only permit, but we're not in a position to approve the vertical plans yet for various reasons. It could be a lack of infrastructure around it, but there's enough there to let them get the plans for the building permit approved. Or in a case where the plat or zoning requirements don't allow the project to be built yet, but we're not talking about uses. We're not saying that you can put I don't even want to give examples so I don't offend anyone, but something that is commercial, you can't start building a commercial thing on a residential project, currently zoned residential property, in the hopes that it will be approved in the future. And so with the plat and zoning concept, the partial building permit could be issued if an application to amend a plat or a zone document is currently pending and has reached a certain level where the director has recommended it. So they know it's for certain and it's going to have staff support. We think it's likely that it would go forward. And so the director looks at these to see if it would create a positive precedent for the area, but this is entirely at the developer's sole risk. There's no obligation of the city to approve the plat or zoning amendment or the full building plans, or no obligation, especially on the city council, to do so. And the developers know they're taking a huge risk that they'll have to pull the material out if they install it. And that's why if we get closer to the approval, the directors recommended the plat or zoning amendment for approval. We think there's a more likely chance that it's going to be approved than not. So it's unlikely somebody would spend a bunch of money not knowing if they're actually going to get their approval, then be more likely to take their risk. And all other requirements of the code still apply. So all the other standard building permit requirements would apply. And so the request from staff tonight is to approve this as an emergency ordinance so it can be immediately implemented. And I am here for any questions. Jason is here to answer other questions. I will note that we can't necessarily talk specific projects that this might apply to. There is a special meeting planned for next Monday, I believe, that is one such project, but I don't want to get into the details of that one because that is a quasi-judicial hearing that council will be hearing. So we are here and available.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. So just curious how we guarantee that if for some reason a partial approval is granted and construction begins, how do we guarantee that if the future approvals aren't granted, that the builder or developer would remove what's already been constructed?
This isn't written in the ordinance, and it's one of the key points that we did not address in the ordinance. All development approvals can be conditioned when they're issued, and it's my expectation that Jason and his wisdom would include conditions about removing those items. And so he would, one, use discretion in determining who he can grant this to, and two, possibly require some additional bonding as a condition that would obligate the removal. Otherwise, the property is not developable until that's taken out. But we certainly don't want to grant this wherever it might end up with a concrete slab or a giant hole or a pit, like in Parks and Recreation, right? You don't want to have a pit out in the middle, especially one that is for a building that's 250,000 square feet. Jason, do you have any more on that?
No, Robert, I think you actually, yes, but I think you did hit the nail on the head. Councilmember Grimes, to Robert's point, I would look at adding a standard condition term to which if there was lack of activity, inactivity, and or the lack of granting an approval for one reason or another, that we would take the necessary steps for the site to be returned to its pre-existing conditions, and or for the partial building that was erected, or not erected, but foundation that was poured and or a hole that was dug to be modified accordingly based on if it was approved, but obviously subject to certain changes that went through the review process. So we will make sure to have those guarantees outside of the ordinance, but in an agreement in which the applicant or the developer or the owner would sign, understanding that this could be the risk and or, once again, the process that they will have to abide by.
So you said as a standard condition, so anytime a developer would request this, you would automatically put that condition of approval for financial assurance on the approval?
Either financial insurance and or I would say predominantly thinking a actual restoration of the property back to pre-existing conditions if, once again, they were denied, once again, for whatever reason, a plat, a development plan, or a full building permit, and or, like I said, or the building permit itself, and then returning it, once again, to those pre-existing conditions that they found the site in to shore compliance. So that would be a standard condition and or, like I said, looking at the financial assurance of a security or a bond as another measure of protection.
Okay, that's all for now. Thank you.
Councilmember Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. So my question is, when I was reading it, why now? We've had large projects, the McLean, there's other big projects, and it seems to me that we're kind of trying to push this through rapidly as an emergency for something that we don't know, that we can't talk about. And to me, it's like we have a process, you know, but so just help me explain why now, and, you know, how is it fair to others that might not be in the loop? And I don't know what we're talking about here, to be honest with you, so we don't even know. But so I just, help me explain that, and how did we get to this emergency instead of going through the process that's been laid out for years, and the right process.
So thank you, Councilmember Boyle. Great questions. So I think it's worth sharing that the ability for phased approvals already currently exists in the International Building Code. So I would say from the statutory construction of our land development code, we didn't have a mechanism or an ability to be able to actually move forward with what is already allowed through the International Building Code and the practice that are allowed and afforded to all local jurisdictions, governments, and municipalities. To your question about why now, I will share with you, the city is once again continuing to see the sustained and quite frankly, significant growth and development. And I would say the complex long-term projects that we're seeing in nature are now starting to face tighter and tighter construction schedules, particularly even more so now with the COVID-19 pandemic. And what the city is recognizing a burgeoning need to provide the flexibility, but try to also maintain a strategic delivery process. And we believe the phased approach gives us that ability to still control the process, but also foster growth and development that will be a benefit to the community. I mean, some of the advantages that you will find is that obviously with these large and complex projects, what comes with them is job creation. And with what we've heard from a variety of different developers is that this provides an opportunity for a project that either through complicated delays on construction or weather or pandemics, and the need to want to be able to create that financial investment within the community, this helps them stay on track, to be able to bring those jobs where people can sit in chairs, put minds in front of computers, and be able to have that employment opportunity here in the city. So for us, we see this as an opportunity as a different form of economic stabilization at a time where we're seeing this continued interest in being able to bring those jobs to Commerce City. I think what I look at and how I look at it, quite frankly, and just to be frank with you all, is the risk. What is the risk to us as a local jurisdiction? It's my professional advice that we have a low risk, because that risk lies with the property owner. It lies with the applicant. They have to cautiously weigh their level of investment, the time that they're putting effort, and knowing that they have our support in the bulk and dimensional standards and the layout of their building to move forward with ultimately being able to have it go vertical in its position. We're not talking use here. If there was a question of use, obviously I would have a concern there with you, because once again, we want to be able to promote the development that is consistent and then tailor with the existing zoning in place outside of some adjustments for building location, because the development and design trends are changing dramatically as well through this time. But with use, I'd be more hesitant. We're not talking about that here. We're really talking about the structures in place. And if they're willing to take those steps and assume that liability and obviously relieve us of that liability, and know that once again, I can't guarantee a comment-free process. So they have to understand that parts of the building may change, maybe not, or it may have to be removed. But once again, this is to be able to help keep on track with what we're starting to see as a very changing and ever evolving development climate, once again, over this past year, and just with what we anticipate going forward with the response to the pandemic and just how construction schedules are becoming that much more defined by it.
Thank you for that answer, and it really gives me a good idea of it. But to me, then we should run with it just as a normal, not the emergency. I think that's why we have processes to just go normal with to an ordinance, just like the normal schedule. I think you're right on. Thank you. But just an emergency, it's really, to me, seems shady to our residents that why is it an emergency? Why not just go like every other ordinance that we do. Let it go through the process, and definitely will support that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes, thank you. I don't disagree that all of this brings jobs and revenue to Commerce City, which is wonderful. But I would have to agree with Councilmember Guardiola that it doesn't appear to qualify as an emergency ordinance. It concerns me that the agenda on Friday did not have this document, and yet we got it today. So no one really got any time to look at it and explore it and ask what's really going on. So I don't think it's an emergency ordinance either, and can't approve it on that level.
Thank you, ma'am.
Councilmember Hurst.
I was going to leave with something else, but Jason, can you, or Director Roger, can you please one more time try to simplify to me why it is an emergency? Like, what is our immediate need? I understand why an emergency ordinance is passed, so you can act on it quickly. But is there what's the effect if we go through the normal process like Councilman Guardiola is suggesting?
So I will share with you that we have had a handful of projects that have sought in a strategic expedient process because of timeline and constructions. And I would say it's been a handful. What it has, without this mechanism, what it has led for us as staff is to have a, I'll say, an elongated process to delivery of that building or those buildings or sites to the public and to the community, which has then led for us have to find other solutions, which I would say impact us as staff, shorten timelines of reviews, quick turnarounds with respect to our referral agents, which once again, we're trying to make up the difference by not allowing that strategic delivery through this process. I would say once I had hit, or once it became to me that we started to see that this wasn't an outlier, but once again, I'll say a short-term need because of the environment that we are in. It to me elicited a conversation with you all and working that through with Robert's guidance on how to craft this ordinance from a very limited strategic and I'll say limited standpoint for a sector of our community, and when I mean community development community, in order to be able to provide that expediency and that efficacy for us as well as we're performing our level of review. So that's what drove the need for this conversation today.
So is it going to remove a time burden from your staff, do you believe? Like, I understand not only your staff, but staff all around the metro in your department are feeling it pretty heavy right now. Do you think that if this emergency ordinance passed, that it would have an immediate benefit to your staff?
Immediate benefit to my staff, as I view it, Councilmember Hurst, and take this for what it may, right? Our schedule is going to be our schedule, right? This doesn't absolve you from having to get a full building permit. It's looking at how we strategically move those timeframes around that does give bandwidth and capacity to my staff, but also being able to meet the overall timeframe without having to sacrifice potentially certain review criteria and or having to work at a heightened pace, which could lead to some human error or factor. So there are, I would say, benefits to the process for us as staff in the main.
So sorry. Now I appreciate that explanation. It's interesting because just Friday I had an accidental conversation, meaning no idea that this topic would ever come up. I didn't even know this person was involved in doing stuff like this. But This person's looking for a very large or working to develop a very large project. They're looking our general area, and I was going to bring this to you guys tomorrow. And one of the things that they were talking about is just how critical financing is right now. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and even with the fantastic, amount of money to put forward, and all the things that you would usually be checking the boxes in the finance world, there's still a lot of different types of financing going ahead. And there's also some other challenges. I think this is something that I would applaud you guys for finding and trying to identify as a solution, because it's leveling the playing field in a sense to me as well. Whereas, you just called out that in an international code, we have this ability to do this through phasing, where some of our competitors, they're not really our competitors, maybe our neighboring cities that are competing for the same business to come to them, already have this available to them. And so when that business is a must and having this flexibility in their financing due to the conditions of the market right now, this allows them to deliver that project in kind of these uncertain times. And right now, for some companies, this is a great time to invest, but you still have to get over some of these barriers. And this company that I was talking to specifically is a Colorado-based company, great, and they're looking to move headquarters. And so it's like, we could be looking at, I have no idea if that'll ever pan out, but we could be looking at an opportunity. And if there's some, barriers to entry there, I appreciate you guys understanding those barriers and looking for opportunities to fix those. Now, whether that's an emergency or not, I think, with what's kind of on your docket or what's kind of, on your schedule, I would take your word that it's not shady. This is seriously just trying to improve the processing. And because it's not hurting a homeowner per se or a resident, this is focused on the commercial development side. I feel like, I best suit your judgment on this one. And then obviously Sheasley's judgment on this one as well.
May I offer, since you dared say my name, I wanted to reference council received a call for a special meeting today, and I'm not getting into the meat of what will be discussed at the public hearing other than to say it was in the notice. And I think it's fair to draw the conclusion that this ordinance is connected to this special meeting that's going to be held next Monday night to consider a PUD zone document amendment that relates to setbacks and floor area ratio standards. How big a building is compared to the rest of the lot and how far from property lines it can be. And so there's a pending PUD amendment there. And I think it's safe to presume from your standpoint that those two things are connected. So there is a project out there that is pending that needs accommodation. And that's why staff was recommending an option to ensure that the project continues through the normal process to get the zone amendment if council approves the zone amendment. And so wanted to highlight that because that is not a secret and it won't be a secret, and it's on your agenda now. And that is for the property south of East 84th, north of 81st, and west of Tower to the Arsenal. So it's an area with large commercial properties currently. And so if that helps inform anybody as well.
Just to add to that, Robert, thank you for that. And like I said, there's things that bring these matters to attention to a head. Robert eloquently brought up what has brought this to a head. I mean, we've been, I'll say, successful in our past with how to be, I'll say, solutions oriented in our various design exercises. And like I said, our practices with our schedule, but that can only go so far without truly looking at process. And like I said, there's always something that will drive a process to a head. And obviously that is what this is, and wanting to bring that conversation to you. And I will say, I appreciate your thoughts and your comments on the matter, and wanted to share, what we saw as the problem statement and what we see as the risk and the advantages as it relates to the process.
Councilmember Madera.
Can you think of a project or, something in the past where having this amendment would have been beneficial, and kind of explain how that would have been beneficial?
So
Or Jason says one, there may be some, he may do it in a different city, but in some cases, economic development prospects have confidentiality around them, so you may not know that something goes. But Jason, if you have examples, go for it.
Yes, and I can't speak to the particular nature around this item due to Robert's point of confidentiality, but in a previous experience where I've worked at in tandem while working through there was a site plan review, a partial permit there, which it was for a foundation only, was issued, given an understanding that one, the use was permitted, two, city staff in coordination with the developer and obviously our referral agents felt comfortable that the, I'll say, building orientation, site layout, parking, landscaping were generally acceptable, and that any commentation moving forward was going to be nuanced and or finessed for, once again, refining and meeting the standards, but not substantive to shifting locations of buildings and or drive aisles or parking, that we felt comfortable in issuing that foundation only permit in tandem with that site development. Now there were some limitations on how far you could then take it beyond that phase of development. Once again, to make sure that we're keeping the developer's feet to the fire in bringing the process full tilt for the entitlement applications, and ultimately then being able to submit for the whole building permit or vertical construction in order to, once again, finalize the development and allow for occupancy to be taken.
And do you see this, being used with any kind of frequency going forward?
No, sir. I would say, once again, I think what was one of the key things that we wanted to put in there is that we're seeing this with large, complex projects, typically your projects that are over 250,000 square feet in size, ones that, come with just complicated internal functionality or operational aspects that, we work with on the back end during the building permit review, but ultimately at the same time, they have a long-term nature and precedent-setting aspect with us at the entitlement stage. And I would foresee that this being a very limited use of this process, because it may not be for everybody. Because once again, the risk is on the developer, and they have to weigh what level of investment, financial investment, that they want to put into the ground. And for certain business models, they may be willing, and some they may not. But for the ones that I would say that have a defined use that they know is able to move forward per the zoning, as far as being occupied versus a speculative development, I find it being more for those that have a targeted program in using this, as opposed to someone who may just want to build a number of different industrial buildings without the identified, once again, kind of tenant per tenant use that will go into that. But if it's a single user that has met our zoning code, then I would say this is going to be that use, or it would be utilized for that. But very infrequent are we finding those requests coming to us. But when they do come to us, I see this. So very infrequent, I would assume.
And you mentioned construction at risk. How would you determine that a project is at risk?
So when I say construction at risk, that means that the builder and his contractor, the owner and his contractor, are taking the risk of moving forward and starting construction activities without having that paper in hand from the city to say your site plan has been approved with your building in location A. So that's what is at risk, is with the developer moving forward with digging the hole, pouring the foundation without knowing that his location A has been approved in finality by the city. And that's the at-risk aspect.
And so, from prior experience or, other communities' experience, have you ever come across a situation or a project where they, maybe laid the foundation and then there was no vertical building after fact?
Funny that you should say that, sir. I was actually having a conversation with a colleague of Mr. Sheasley in Mr. Sheasley's office that this issue, as far as somebody digging a hole, pouring a foundation, exists in the Maine today. Someone could have a full building permit, dig a foundation, pour a foundation, and not move forward with its building permit. And we currently don't have the statutory construction in our land development code that would require them to pull that out. Now that's a much larger and much bigger issue that we need to address in community development. Once again, to protect ourselves from half-started, and not finished projects. I would say with this approach that we're moving forward with the emergency ordinance, that is something that could happen, and it's one of the reasons why we would have that term and condition that would require them, after a period of inactivity or withdrawal or denial, to take action on bringing the site back to pre-existing conditions. And then that allows for us to then take enforcement activity upon them if they choose not to. So we would be building in those mitigation measures in the event that was to occur. Well, I would share with you in past experience, if someone's going to expend the money in an expeditious manner in trying to uniformly unilaterally go together with their entitlement, they're going to be pretty much in the deal, and they're going to want to make sure that they are continuing full scale with their project. I would say in the past where we saw some of those skeleton projects was at the height of the recession as well. So a little bit of different environment, different timeframes, apples and oranges with it, but it's still something that we in the planning practice and community development practice do take the mind about making sure that we have those safeguards in place.
Okay. Yeah, you answered my follow-up question with your response too. So thank you.
Welcome.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Jason and Roger, for your presentation. I just have more concerns and agreeing along the lines with Councilwoman Noble and Councilman Guardiola, but I just wish I would have had a little more information, and I feel like the presentation is missing some important information, especially since it was just given to us today. But when you said it's for at risk, well, who would decide who would decide who is at risk actually? I mean, because eventually, like I said, how is it going to be determined? Fairness was determined for every individual that is determined to supposed to be at risk. Is it going to be the same person or, same staff member? So that's one of my questions.
Robert, if you want to tackle this, and
Sure. The risk means the developer is building, the developer holds the risk all the time. There's no determination about risk. In order to get this building permit early, this phased building permit, the developer takes the risk that the later approvals won't be granted and they'll have to rip everything out at their cost, no cost to the city. So that's the risk.
Okay. And then Jason, I like when Councilman Madera asks a question like pouring the foundation, has there ever been any situations where they started the foundation and then they didn't finish? And then you said it could happen, but I'm curious, has it ever happened yet?
I will try to pull from my short memory bank here at Commerce City. I would say, to my knowledge, I have not run across that, nor has my staff brought that to my attention, that we've run into this issue of a project that has started but then has now gone defunct or has gone into hibernation, as we will commonly coin it. Like I said, I've seen it in my past experiences. And like I said, if I could use those as teachable moments, it's making sure that you have safeguards in place, either in the construction of the ordinance or as part of your conditions that you require the property owner, the developer, to enter into, that they will have to take corrective actions at the appropriate time when certain markers have or have not been met. So that is one of the things that Robert and I have discussed and have, would be putting into this agreement, that the property owner or developer, contractor, whoever is applying, would have to agree to.
Jason, if I, and council member, I'm not aware of a situation in Commerce City, but undoubtedly there are shells of buildings and foundations and holes and streets built to subdivisions that never get built in the country. Absolutely. And that is a real risk. And that's why this is intended as a limited thing, as a bit of a swing to try to help some projects that would have an economic benefit to the city, and help to develop property that the city spent money to develop, to enhance the developability of, such as by enhancing Tower Road. But it does come with those risks. And if council is not comfortable with taking that risk and delegating that risk, it would be completely appropriate to not approve this ordinance. We wanted to put this out there as that option, knowing that it could do something to preserve some economic development opportunities. That's why it's presented and why we're advocating for it. But that risk is something we think we can manage, but it is always there.
If I may, excuse me, ma'am, just to add on to Robert's standpoint, once again, I look at this as a short-term effort, an opportunity to help support the development community through, once again, the environment, the pandemic, the dynamic that we were all trying to navigate around that. I don't believe this to be a long-term solution. There's opportunities that we can look in our land development code that we will be able to help provide some of these measures and efforts, but with the immediacy and the response of what was before us with the pandemic and the environment that we are working within, we are trying to respond.
Because how is this going to help staff out when staff was told to reduce their workforce by 25%? But, because the pandemic is going to put us in a pinch on future construction, so I'm just curious, how's that going to help staff out?
Jason, would you agree this likely increases workload because you're splitting up and doing more permits? There may be fees charged differently for it, but staff is here to serve the city and help develop the city, and that may be a way to frame that concept, Ms. Allen Thomas.
So, thank you both, council member and Robert. Your direct question about staffing going down to 25%. That's 25% within the office or within the civic center. Staff has already been currently, obviously, working at those levels for an extended period of time, while still trying to meet the essential service of the construction industry and engine in the Colorado Front Range. So as it relates to increase of work, do I believe that there may be an increase of permit activity submitted to the city? Possibly, yes. But once again, since this is a very infrequent, or I anticipate or assume to be an infrequent use of this process, I do not believe it's going to be a significant or a substantive impact to our staff. I think by limiting in nature to the complex projects and not opening it up to your single family detached, your duplex, your McDonald's, fast food, fast casual restaurant uses, I think once again, it's a very targeted effort in minimizing the impact by still trying to build bandwidth for our team. Because in response, what we're asked of, what my staff's asked of, well, I know you're able to turn it around in 30 days. Well, now I need you to turn around in 10 days. I need you to turn around in 15 days. And that creates an impact on my staff. So by strategically looking at how we create that schedule and look at that strategic delivery process, ultimately does once again play a role in supporting my staff's bandwidth and capacity in the long run.
Yeah, because I mean, maybe it's me, but I don't understand after all these years why today it needs to be like a priority emergency ordinance right now. You know, so that's, I don't quite understand, you know, why today it needs to be a emergency ordinance.
Mr. Mayor, I had raised my hand, but I need to jump in on that specific question. Robert answered part of it, but the specific project that's at stake here, the builder has competed and in essence is still in a competition with a site in another city for this project. And in order to meet the schedule that the prospect has put on the project, they have to start pouring concrete this week or else they will not meet the schedule. That's the reason for an emergency ordinance tonight, to allow them to start pouring concrete. They've agreed that it will be totally at their risk if council chooses not to approve the PUD amendment. So that's why it came up, and that was brought to our attention last week. That's why, and they had been moving through the normal approval process on all of this, and it's basically a last minute type of thing that they are having to respond to, and that's why they've asked us for any way that we could make it possible for them to move forward. And so that's the reason for this emergency ordinance tonight.
Okay, because, you know, that's a concern I have too. Why is the company confidential, you know, and, you know, I just wish we had more time to know, you know, it seems like, are we picking and choosing companies now? And, you know, why is it confidential what company it is?
Because on most of these projects, these large companies will not release information until they've entered into a lease agreement. They want to keep it confidential until that happens. And so that's typical of these large projects. It is a very large company, larger than, it meets the, how can I say this? It's above the threshold of a Fortune 500 company. Or in fact,
and it's Roger and Councilmember Alan Thomas. It's important also to remember you do have a quasi judicial hearing coming up on the matter, and so we can't talk about certain things outside of the aspect. And I appreciate the urgency and apologize we couldn't get it written sooner given the timeline that it came to us. As a reminder, there's case law on Commerce City's emergency ordinance authority, and it is simply if council decides it's an emergency. I understand, and I as you look at emergency ordinances now and in the future, and I'm not telling you you have to vote for this, but I don't want council to feel like they can't adopt something that on a quick basis because it doesn't meet this traditional definition of an emergency. If council makes the statement, or if the ordinance states that it's immediately necessary to preserve the public health, safety, and welfare, and public health, safety, and welfare can include any number of things, including economic development and economic vitality. And Colorado law says that if your ordinance says that, then it constitutes an emergency, and people have voted for it. So I wanted to make that clear. Everything in this is legal, but if council is not comfortable with the justification set forth, then that is your prerogative, of course.
And if I may, council member and Mayor and the rest of council, Roger brings up the point of what, like I said, there's something that always brings something to a head. Robert's intimated it, Roger's intimated it, but I will tell you that, you know, on a weekly basis, Roger and I will have conversations, and the conversations that are laid at my feet are the calls that I get from the development community about, Jason, what can you do with time? in this time. And like I said, sometimes we're very successful in being able to maneuver around our process through creative solution-oriented design exercises and/or time exercises around our timelines and timeframes, and having really good referral partners, both internal and external to the city, to help us to achieve those goals, to get people out there, to get people digging, building, and then occupying. Those pressures have increased, I will admit that. And those discussions that I have with Roger have increased incrementally as well over that period of time. And like I said, this project has, like I said, brought it to a head to bring this conversation forward. To Robert's points and to Roger's points, the decision is yours to make, and obviously we support that decision. We are advocating for, once again, another tool in our tool bag. In my mind, a short-term tool, and then that will allow for us to go through a long-term assessment of the benefits. Once again, the opportunities to improve, to modulate, to modify. But once again, it starts with you all in the direction that is given to us, and the guidance and support for us to move forward or not, and to continue looking for those solution-oriented approaches.
Mr. Sheasley, before we continue on this, is it possible, we have an executive session scheduled for later, is it possible maybe a few details of the project that is in question could be released during that executive session?
No, sir. As it pertains to the hearing coming up, it wouldn't be able to do that without offending quasi-judicial issues. I also don't know that we have authority to disclose items as well. And Jason is shaking his head no.
Unfortunately, we do not have the ability from the user of the site to share the nature of their business with you.
And the user won't be relevant in the determination next week either. It's a thing that you can't use for your decision making.
I was just trying to allow council to have an opportunity to have some context in this. Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. You know, I put my hand up 30 minutes ago with an idea of what I was going to say, and I've come around to a different conclusion now. I understand the urgency in certain circumstances, and I appreciate that and want to be mindful of it with, you know, with an economic development hat on. I would motion to approve this on an emergency basis if it could be, if the ordinance will also include a financial assurance guarantee. Is that something that we can put in? And if it is, I'll happily make the motion now.
If you wanted to do that, Councilmember Grimes, I would say you would move to approve Ordinance 2307 as an emergency ordinance, with the addition of the following language to section 5C. The applicant shall provide financial assurance for the removal and remediation of the property if further approvals are not granted, period.
So moved. Can I do that?
Okay, I have a motion to approve this as an emergency ordinance as amended, providing that there are financial assurances granted should the work not be able to proceed as intended. Councilmember Hurst.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. For all that being said, is there any discussion? Councilmember Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, I think I get it, and I agree with you, Jason. I think the solution-based, everything, but just not in the emergency ordinance form. And it's all right, Mr. Hurst, but I just think there's a process for a reason. And we have to go through that process. If we would have had that meeting before this, more insight, fine. But the emergency ordinance, I think there's a process. And also, we talked about permit times. That's been a challenge in that department since we've been on council. And I appreciate you looking at other ways. I really do. I think, before it was just, this is how long it's taken. That's going to take. And for you to think outside the box and use your knowledge and expertise in bringing stuff like this up. I hope to see this in the regular process, because I think it's a great way for you to have that in your toolbox. But as an emergency ordinance, I just wouldn't be able to agree with it. So I appreciate that, Mr. Rogers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I just want to say real quick, being in the construction industry, I mean, it's a pretty common thing to do partial permits. And as Director Rogers pointed out, it is not something that cities or counties or jurisdictions do on a regular basis. It's a very rare thing that, for example, my company's been issued. It's a very rare thing when we do that. And it is on those larger projects. It's when you've got to move quickly, you're under deadlines. Or for example, you're taking over a project and you've got to, get moving on those deadlines to stay on schedule. So I just want to point out that I think that, I understand the frustration with this being an emergency ordinance. However, this is a pretty common thing, but it's not something that's done on the regular in any other jurisdictions. And it's also, the contractor or the builder, they're the ones that are at risk. So, I appreciate the financial assurances from Councilmember Grimes, but again, it is the contractor that's at risk of having to remove something if the permitting doesn't line up. So I just want to point that out.
Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, I'm supportive of this. I don't know how many times I've heard it on council over the years that, we're all for commercial development and we'll do whatever it takes to help staff. And then when the opportunity comes, it's like, it's a completely different song sometimes. And so, just want to remind people that we have to, do what we have to do to make it easy to do business in Commerce City, because these are the businesses that'll be across the highway in, southeastern Denver and all along, Pena and Aurora and all those places that we lose out on, and then we complain after the fact. And so I just want to, ask council not to be short-sighted when it comes to this. I know it's fast and there's a lot of unknowns. I'm in the same boat as you. I don't like, being held in the dark, but that's the process, right? Is we can't talk about specific projects or any of that until that comes before council. But right now, what we're talking about is our land development code. So, we have to really keep it tailored to that, and we have to, make sure that we're making a land development code that is not only good for development in Commerce City, but also, safe for our residents and, our city, and make sure that we're being taken care of. And, from what I've heard from staff today is, I have that assurance from staff, and, my knowledge of the construction business is you're not going to spend millions of dollars to start something to not finish it. That the risk is completely on those developers that are, committing to building in the city. And, we talk about it all the time, the revenue disparity between the North and the South. And truth is, we need those businesses to come in to help have a viable city. So I'm going to be supportive of this measure.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I just wanted to also call out in the kind of approval for the emergency that we are not in a normal time, as stated by staff, that this was situational. So it's brought to a head, last minute, obviously, since it wasn't on our Friday update. But the state, county, we're making flexible changes for this pandemic every day. It's not business as usual by any means. And so making a flexible to allow for some, being flexible to allow for something to proceed when we carry no additional risk seems like something that I'll continue to support, because I can almost assure you when you are making that type of investment and committing those types of dollars, and I don't know what those numbers are, but you can only assume, right? Because it's over 250,000 square feet, that you have your ducks in a row and you've checked all your boxes before you'd make some type of commitment like this to ask for a partial permit. Phased permits happen in every construction project that CDOT does. And so I know that this is not something that we're going out on a limb and kind of reinventing the wheel on. This is something that's used on a very regular basis. And I agree that I wish we would have caught this 25 years ago or whenever the international code allowed for this. But this is going to be part of the process of a new set of eyes in Director Rogers and different set of experiences. He's going to help us pinpoint some of our barriers to entry that potentially can make this site a no-go because the competing site doesn't have this type of barrier. And so I don't know that to be the case. I'm just saying let's try to eliminate the barriers when we've been told that we're fully legal and we're not in normal operational times, and this is just a barrier to entry to obviously we have no details, but it sounds like something that we would want in the north side of our city in terms of economic growth.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much. This does put a stake in the ground, and they generally do. And it's hard to get the stake back out of the ground afterwards. Witness the storage units that are still at 120th and Chambers. Why can't we approve an ordinance after we have the special meeting vote? Why does this have to come first?
You can, however, second reading on the zoning ordinance will be on December 7th, I believe. If that is, if it is approved on first reading next Monday. And so the building permit for the building in its entirety, or just the partial building permit at that point, could be granted only after that ordinance is effective. So later that week, mid-December, I believe Mr. Tinklenberg indicated an imminent need in this project to use this tool this week and before the special meeting. But yes, so that's why it is presented tonight as an emergency.
What does a pandemic have to do with anything?
Let me weigh in on that. This has been, I would say this is one of the form of questions and or requests that with the pandemic, we have started to see come to a head with me and my staff.
I don't understand. You've said that before, Mr. Rogers, and I really don't understand what that means. It's a little too vague for me.
Let me try to be a little bit more exact, if I may, ma'am, for you. What I mean by that is with the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, I will say my office anticipated that we would have what is, in my mind, a V recovery, a sharp decline of work and a sharp, I'll say, incline back to our normal levels. What we have seen since the very early stages has been a sustained or incremental growth of development activity, particularly around these large complex projects and around our residential development. Mr. Tinklenberg, Interim City Manager Tinklenberg, has brought forward to you, a level of staffing resource requests based on this sustained and growing need within the development community because of this activity and what we foresee going forward for the next, in my assumption, the next 3 to 5 years. But associated with that, with these large projects, we have been approached with requests to adjust timelines, to work harder, to work faster. And we can only do so much at a staff level based on the tools and the resources that we have through the statutory construction of our land development code, the zonings that are in place, and just the timeframes and the overlapping review and strategic review that we can provide based on those processes. So once again, in the past, we've been able to work nimbly through solutions-oriented approaches. Once again, looking at design, looking at timelines, maybe a mix of those two, but we've started to come to a head, and this project was that one that has brought this conversation to you all as council. Could there be more in the future of this similar request? Possibly, yes. If we're not able to, once again, work through what has been our traditional means of adjusting schedules or trying to work with solutions-oriented design approaches. So this is, once again, another opportunity for us as staff to build into that strategic approach.
I have no problem with your strategic approach or having another tool in the toolbox. That I have no problem with. I do have a problem with the emergency ordinance, however.
Thank you.
The reason it's urgent at this point is in order for them to keep the project in Commerce City, they have to pour concrete this week in order to meet the schedule that's been given to them. And this is a project that has over 400 jobs at stake. So that's the reason that we view it as urgent.
Did they only learn of this today?
No, as I mentioned earlier, we were approached last week about this. I want to say about midweek. I don't remember the exact day. And in order for us to be able to accommodate them meeting the schedule that they've been given, that's the reason for bringing you this emergency, pardon me, ordinance tonight.
Councilman Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. Could we put a timeline on this emergency ordinance so it goes away? And then if we could do the proper process. That way, if we do 30 days, 60 day, and then it goes back to the regular, and then you could start the process to get this in the books for future, and we would. Is that a possibility?
Mr. Rogers had asked for that in the draft ordinance, and I had advised him against that, thinking that we could repeal it if we didn't want to use it. But he had talked about a sunset on it, but because it seemed like a useful tool, I advised against it.
I think I would like a sunset. That way it goes away, and then the process start.
So you would, if you want to make that as a motion while there's a pending ordinance, it would be a motion to amend the ordinance to establish that it would expire within 30 days or whatever period of time you wanted to do.
Mr. Rogers, what would you suggest?
I would say no more than 90 days. I think that would, as we continue our further evaluation through the normal process, not the emergent process, it'll give us a good cross section of the type of applications, if any more so do come in, electing to utilize the process, and while also giving us the time to further refine maybe some of the ordinance language as it relates to additional criteria, so that we can once again have this as a more longer term tool for our toolkit than once again trying to address the immediacy of needs.
There is a motion on the table, though.
This motion would effectively be an amending motion. And so that would be voted on before the main motion would be considered. If that makes sense. So if that motion were made, then that would be voted on, and then you'd be voting on the emergency ordinance as amended.
And then nowhere, where does it say the 250 square feet or that the large, the square footage that you guys said? Is there a limit?
Section 5B says that a building permit may only be issued if the building or group of buildings for which the permit is applicable is non-residential and equal to or exceeds 250,000 square feet of total building square footage.
So with the group of buildings, that we could have the same issue that we're having up north with, I mean, not close to the residential, but some huge company could buy a plot of land and just put a bunch of industrial. I thought this was for a single company.
Again, they couldn't just put industrial. If the underlining zoning is industrial, then potentially you're dealing with issues where there is something in the zoning code that makes the proposed development not appropriate, but at least at a staff level, a change to that zoning that would accommodate it is being recommended. So they wouldn't just come in and put that in. They would begin only constructing foundation items if they chose to, at their risk and at their financing risk. I think it's that the time frame there is quite likely such that it would be development review team and the director would approve or recommend something to go to planning commission. It would be in front of council, 10 to 45 days later, most likely. And so there would be a very limited window in which this would apply.
Okay.
So you wouldn't be seeing things go in there. Again, we're not talking about changing uses. The uses are already there. People may be upset that something's going in, but something was going to go in there at some point anyway.
Right. Okay. So then I would definitely make a motion to amend, right? If I'm correct, Mr. Sheasley, to add a sunset date of 90 days. How would I do that?
Hold on one second before you do that. Councilmember Grimes, are you willing to amend your motion to include a 90-day sunset in this emergency ordinance?
No, and I'd like to call for a vote on the original motion, please.
All right, well, I have a motion being made by Councilmember Wadiola. So Councilman Wadiola, please make your motion.
I'd like to, oh, go ahead.
No, I heard that you did. I believe you made the motion and you would be waiting for a second at this point.
Right.
Okay, so we have a motion to sunset this emergency ordinance if it passes in 90 days. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, so I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second to amend this motion, the original motion to sunset this ordinance in 90 days should it pass. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Grimes, do you have discussion on the second motion that is on the table? Councilmember Alan Thomas, do you have discussion?
No, that was an accident.
Councilmember Hurst.
Just for clarification, are we including the Councilman Guardiola, are you including the financial assurances and the 90 days?
No, the financial assurances is in the original motion. And so all you're voting on now is whether a sunset should apply here. And then if this passes, then there will be a vote on the motion to approve the ordinance with the financial assurance and sunset or no sunset.
One last clarifying point. If we have the 90 days, is the intention to then go through the formal process, non-emergency process with the same similar type of legislation? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Wadiola.
Sorry, that was an accident.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to amend the motion to approve this emergency ordinance so that it sunsets in 90 days. We can do that through a voice vote. There's no other discussion. So if you're in favor of the sunset, please raise your hand physically so I can count the votes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Motion passes 8-1. Now we are back to the original motion to approve this emergency ordinance with the financial assurance clause being added in. We have a motion and a second. Seeing no further need for discussion, and also this will sunset in 90 days. Will the city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2307, an emergency ordinance of the City of Commerce City, Colorado, amending Section 21-3210 of the Land Development Code to permit phased approvals for certain building permit applications pending full construction plan submittal or plat or zoning amendments. Councilmember Madera.
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola.
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank.
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes 9-0.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Next on the agenda is administrative council business. The first item on the administrative council business is a follow-up to the South Platte Crossing purchase. Will Mr. Sheasley please lead the discussion?
Thank you, Mayor. All of these three items are mine. Last week, council gave general consensus direction to terminate the South Platte Crossing purchase and sale agreement. I just need a motion to authorize the city manager to terminate that contract.
Councilmember Grimes.
I move to terminate the contract on the South Platte Crossing property.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to instruct the city manager to terminate the purchase agreement for South Platte Crossing. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Alan Thomas. Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, this is a real tough one for me because I'm just going to state it again real quick, but I think we would be good in investing in this area to have some type of services available due to the history of this building, due to what used to be there, what can be there. I agree that cost, long-term cost, looks like a significant burden to us, but I still feel like, you know, this area is going to be the center of new development in the south side of the city. And you know, whether that happens quickly or not, it is, there's kind of proof in the pudding that every time a light rail station gets built, there's development that follows shortly after. And so I would just, you know, if this proceeds and we do not purchase the floor, I would just ask that we look to be opportunistic in the future to have a footprint in this area.
Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, you know, when I look at this, I see it as investing back in our community, right? I mean, earlier tonight we invested $600,000, which is almost the price of purchasing that floor on the building to help construct a road that's going to serve one business. You know, and if we're willing to do that for a business, why aren't we willing to do the same for our community and our people? You know, the residents that need that. So, you know, that for me, especially being in the part of the town that it is, and it being the epicenter for new growth and possibilities in the future, I think we're really missing out. And you know, I think by not participating in this, we're showing the community that we're not supportive of the people and institutions that come into our community to help build it up when they need help, right? I mean, the ULC took a chance and they reached out to us because they needed help. And, you know, I'm sure many of you have gotten contacted by nonprofits that said that they'd benefit from this type of space, or something where we have all the nonprofits and services together so they can harmonize and leverage off of each other and build each other up to better serve our community. And by passing on this opportunity, I think we're doing the community a disservice.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree that it's important to make investments in our community and in nonprofits. This has been a challenging topic for me to weigh the pros and cons of as well. But the thing that I'm trying to remember myself is that, we as a city are not in the business of being landlords, and we're also not in the human services industry in the way that we're talking about right now. And I think there are better ways for us to support nonprofits in our community that make them accessible in areas that they choose to be in, rather than having a spot where they have to be in. And I would prefer to see us go down a path where we support individual nonprofits on a as requested basis to help with startup costs for finding appropriate brick and mortar space for each of those and in parts of the community that they choose to be in. I'm definitely in support of, let me back up a second. The mayor said something last week that really hit home for me. And that was, these nonprofits are, and I apologize if I don't get you exactly correct on the quote, but they're impact multipliers. Close, Mayor?
Close. Term I used was force multipliers, but yeah,
Force
same.
multipliers. And I appreciate that. And I know that that's true. And I serve on a number of nonprofit boards, and I know that the struggles from a budgetary standpoint of maintaining and upkeeping a nonprofit budget and even starting a nonprofit. But I just don't think that investment in real estate and sinking the city into a landlord type role is the appropriate way to do that. So I'll still be voting to direct staff to pass on this opportunity, but do have some ideas for other opportunities that I'd like to share with council later.
Councilmember Hurst.
That was up from last time. I apologize.
Okay. My understanding is there is a representative from the ULC who is sitting in the attendees side. Does anybody on council object to providing him an opportunity to speak for a moment? Seeing none, Mr. Gibson, would you please move him over so he has, excuse me, so that individual, I don't know if it's a he or she, has an individual opportunity to speak.
Yep, I see Mark Marshall raising his hand, so I will move him over. Mark, you should be able to unmute yourself, and if you have a webcam and feel comfortable doing so, turning that on as well. And looks like we can hear you.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council, for the opportunity to speak this evening. We are in Commerce City at the request of Commerce City. About 5 years ago, we were invited into the city to look at development opportunities and to be able to provide affordable commercial space to businesses in Commerce City. We took a big chance, made an investment in the former Adams County Human Services building. We're partnered now with Adams County. They own the ground floors. But this is a tough time. This is a tough time across the board for everybody, be it nonprofit, municipalities, more than anybody, the citizens of across the state, citizens in Commerce City, the nonprofits in Commerce City. This time more than any time, we need the support of the city. As I said, we took a risk. We came there. Lease up of the space has been modest at best. We put out a lot of money. We've lost quite a money as a small nonprofit. So to be able to have the support at this time from the city would be the delineation between success or failure of this project. Possibly there are some other ways that we could move on, but I think the support of the city right now would be greatly appreciated and needed for us to move forward with the development plan as we've proposed. I mean, we've always said that we wanted to have a community hub here. When Adams County moved up to 120th and Pecos, that left a huge void in the services in Commerce City. A lot of people there, and you know, the county started out offering free space to nonprofits to move into their building there, and free rent is hard to compete with. We have reached out to a number of organizations. We've got some other groups that are interested in coming into the building, but it's been slow at this point, and I won't say it's absolutely make or break, but support from the city would be greatly appreciated and could further this development immensely. And knowing that we've got a light rail across the street from the building, it's going to be, well, it's operational now and able to move citizens up and down the corridor here from one end of the county to the next. We've also got a property right, we've parceled out a piece right in front of the building that we are going through the rezoning process on to create 60 units of affordable housing right there on the same parcel. It's an acre that we've carved out. We are looking to provide affordable housing for, excuse me, for people earning in the range of 30 to 80% of the area median income. And we all know housing is in desperate need now. Affordable housing is in desperate need. And I'd like to quote, take your quote, Councilman Madera, that right now, this is the time to invest in the citizens, in the community. And this is a point, I think, when it can really magnify the amount, the work that we're doing to be able to have the city behind us at this point. So I just wanted to say those words and thank you for your time and consideration.
Thanks, sir, for those words and for putting this into a little bit better context. Is there any other discussion on this item? Seeing none, I am not in favor of the motion to pull out of the purchase and sale agreement. I think that a lot of great points have been made this evening on both sides of the conversation. However, what I look at is this is an investment in the community, and this is an investment in an area that we would love to see revitalized, and we can be on the ground floor of that revitalization. The nonprofits that operate in our community fill a huge void of the fact that we don't have the health and the human services component that is a county function, but these nonprofits help to fill that void and make it a local level. They operate in Commerce City. They're Commerce City residents that step up and do their part in order to make a difference in their community. And we have an opportunity now to help them be successful. And we have an opportunity to give them a place where they can congregate and they can work together, and we can provide one-stop shop. And it's easy to say that, hey, let's go ahead and just, put up different areas in different parts of the city. But the reality is, with transportation being difficult, public transportation being difficult, with bus routes being canceled, being shelved or being reduced in times that they operate, it's a lot easier to have one location that people can go to where they could visit multiple nonprofit organizations, where they could get the help that they need, that we as a city cannot provide, but we can help those organizations provide. So I want to see us continue with this investment. I want to see us continue the partnership with the ULC. And again, they were invited to come to Commerce City. It was a huge deal whenever they purchased that building. We all saw it as a great thing for helping the community. Now it's our turn to give back and make sure that they're successful in their vision that they have for that building, as well as some of the other nonprofits that wish to move over into that building as well. So with that being said, no further discussion. We can do a voice vote. So if you are in favor of terminating the purchase and sale agreement, please raise your hand. I am counting 4. If you are against terminating the purchase and sale agreement, please raise your hand. One, two, three. Councilman, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Motion fails. We will continue with the purchase and sale agreement. Next on the agenda is the ratification of the tolling agreement. Mr. Sheasley, this one is also yours.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Mayor. Last Thursday, I executed a tolling agreement between South Adams County Water and Sanitation District, the city, and a private landowner at the southwest corner of 104th and 85. That's Mr. Hammer's property that is seeking potential annexation. Mr. Hammer has raised potential claims that a sewer line that the city or NIGID may have acquired, parts of that sewer line encroach or abut up against his property. It's built back in 2012, and he believes he has a potential claim there. To further the annexation, we recommend allowing him to preserve his claims unless they're already time barred as we work through that annexation process. And so I wanted council ratification of that agreement that I believe I circulated by email. And so just be a motion to ratify the tolling agreement with Mr. Hammer and the Water District.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Sheasley regarding this? Mr. Hurst?
Try to simplify this for me, please. So I'm not asking for if his claim is legal, gonna win, not gonna win. I know you don't know that. You obviously have a position on it, but so is his claim essentially that this was installed on his property and therefore inhibits his ability to develop that property?
Yeah. Essentially, his claim is that there are parts of this sewer system that are on his property. It is, if at all, it is a very minuscule amount, but it has some impact. And so he believes that is a taking of his property without just compensation, essentially. And yes, the city does not believe the claim is valid, but we are postponing the delay that question, resolving that question is the idea as we attempt to work through annexation.
What's the risk involved, if you don't mind, please?
If we were not to approve the tolling agreement, we would likely see a lawsuit filed sooner than later, and it could disrupt the annexation. Or and what we're giving up here is the period between excuse me, last Thursday and 6 months, unless the agreement's terminated, wouldn't count towards a statute of limitations argument where we say, you know, I think it's about a 2-year time limit. A claim that has to be made, has a lawsuit has to be filed within a couple of years of the injury or the occurrence of the injury. All of these things about when that actually began to run would be litigated down the road. We're avoiding having to litigate that at this point. We anticipate resolving the question during the annexation process. I think I can share that without jeopardizing the attorney-client privilege.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Sheasley? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to ratify the tolling agreement. Councilmember Hurst.
I'd like to motion to ratify the tolling agreement. Approve the ratification of the tolling agreement, I guess.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to ratify the tolling agreement. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst.
Hand what didn't go down, apologize.
Seeing no request for discussion, we will take a voice vote. All those in favor, please raise your physical hand. And that is going to pass 9-0. Next up is engagement of bankruptcy special counsel. Mr. Sheasley, this one is also yours.
Yes, thank you. The last item is I want to engage engage and have a special counsel available to answer bankruptcy questions, primarily in regard to the extraction bankruptcy, which I think would require very little work, but I want to have somebody available for that specialized area. Then we occasionally see questions, bankruptcy filings from taxpayers or people that may potentially be taxpayers, and typically we don't need to be involved in that, but because it is so specialized, we wish to avoid being there, being in a position where we don't have somebody to consult with. And so I've consulted with a few people and identified Matt Skeen, who is a bankruptcy practitioner in Denver, who is currently advising other municipalities regarding extraction. And so I would just ask for authorization to retain Matt Skeen as special counsel for bankruptcy.
Are there any questions for Mr. Sheasley regarding this? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to authorize the city attorney to retain a bankruptcy counsel as recommended. Mayor Pro Tem,
Motion to authorize the city attorney to retain bankruptcy counsel as recommended.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to authorize the city attorney to retain bankruptcy counsel as recommended. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will take a show of hands vote. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is going to pass 9-0. Thank you. Next up, are there any council members that have administrative council business? Councilmember Noble.
First of all, I received, and I'm not sure if we all did, that there are 1,500 residential units next to, or not residential units, but residential parcels next to industrial property in Commerce City. And I would actually like to be able to see where those are, where we have this issue. And I was only given a number, so I would like to have that happen. I don't know what that would require, but I think asking our residents to live next door to industrial is asking too much of them. And we need to be able to make well-informed land use decisions when they come before us. And without that information, I feel like one hand is tied behind my back. Mr. Rogers, how long would that take you?
Thank you, Councilmember Noble. Staff can prepare maps that identify the residential properties, parcels in question with adjacency to industrial land. I believe when we last spoke about it, ma'am, that we would use an identifier of 300 feet as a rough estimate of adjacency to highlight those properties. So I will circle back with my staff, and once those maps are prepared and we will work in earnest, we will get those maps out to the full council.
Thank you very much. I'd like to make comment on Max Staffron also regarding the thefts in the area. His were in Turnberry, and we have had numerous thefts in Reunion as well, including one of my constituents who lives in the Carriage Homes. She happens to be my daughter. So this was about 3 weeks ago and was part of a spate of break-ins that were occurring at that time. Went in through the back window of a truck outside the home, took the remote control, used the remote control then to get into the garage, and took tools from the truck, tools from the garage. So it was pretty extensive. I think there were 6 homes in the neighborhood that were hit that night. I would like to know what is occurring, and I would like to point out that one of the members of the police, I'm not sure what it's called, Chief, but your committee, one of the members of your committee commented regarding these thefts and made some statements regarding the percentage of thefts of unlocked cars and et cetera. And I wound up having a separate conversation via private message and learned that there is actually a monthly report that is sent to the city. And I just felt that I can't reassure my constituents. I can't tell them whether they should be worried or not. I can't tell them what's going on any more than I could tell them what was going on when they thought that there's all sorts of crime associated with marijuana stores. I don't even know that. We have many marijuana stores in Commerce City, but we don't have any information on whether there's crime associated with them. I think it's becoming a real problem. So there's two things here. Mr. Daffron and his neighbors and people in Reunion are worried about what's occurring right now regarding all of these thefts. And then secondly, us being able to get information that helps us be good council members.
Thank you for the question. The first portion of your concern regarding the Turnberry incidents, Commerce City is not on an island. The entire country is engaged with varying levels of crime due to the pandemic and a host of other problems. We are not immune to that. Our staffing challenges are very real. Our COVID-19 challenges are very real. And when you work on Graveyard and everybody wears a mask and gloves, and we have a Senate bill that makes punitive for officers to engage in aggressive policing that may make a mistake in stopping one of these people, that is a very real concern. So what I can tell you is this. We understand that there is frustration on the part of residents with regards to what's going on. What I can assure you is it is not just a Commerce City problem. Every Adams County jurisdiction, and I'll rephrase that, every jurisdiction in the Denver metro area is experiencing the same types of problems. It is not only a problem with policing in general, but there are problems with the actual prosecution of those. Because of COVID-19, we can't have jury trials. Because the DAs can't put people in jail, we can't take them to jail. We issue tickets for stolen vehicles. And so the punitive nature of committing crimes simply is not where it was a year ago. And that has caused quite a few concerns, not only amongst my staff, but clearly among residents as well. And we do our best to explain that to residents when we get the opportunity. The information that was pushed out in the city manager's update is based upon real crime information that was prevalent and being openly discussed. And we wanted to provide residents with some information. I've been before council multiple times and advised you of the problems we have with our CAD and RMS system. I have mountains of data. I have no way to isolate that and give you a monthly report of every question that you may ask. It simply is not possible. My only alternative is purchase a new system or work with what we have, and that's what we're doing. I can answer relevant questions. Let me rephrase that, not relevant questions. Pointed questions, we can sort of deal into that, but I don't have the ability to push a button and retrieve all of the data that you're asking for. If you wanted to know about marijuana shops, that requires about 40 hours of somebody going into our CAD and RMS system and hand-picking that data out. It is not as simple as pushing a button and getting that information available. So I do understand your concerns. I am equally frustrated, but given some of our staffing challenges and the time it takes to produce that, for instance, our quarterly report takes about 2 weeks for us to produce. And that's 2 weeks of probably 4 to 5 staff members doing nothing but reviewing reports and putting check boxes in columns. Our problems are very real. They're also very expensive to fix. And given what we're dealing with, I really don't have a very easy, candid answer for you. What I can tell you, if there are some pointed questions that you need answered, we certainly can do that. Just realize it's going to take time and staff time that aren't out working the streets, literally reviewing reports to make determinations to put them into classifications. Currently, that is the only way we can do our crime reporting.
Are you able to use any civilians to do any of that kind of work? I mean, what I'm looking for, Chief, is how can we help you help our residents, which helps us? I mean, we are all intrinsically bound together in this. It's not me against you or you against me. It's all of us trying to figure this out. How much do you need in order to accomplish it? Interestingly, the National League of Cities is going on right now, the conference, and one of the seminars that I attended was called How Chattanooga Prioritizes Collaboration, Data, and Racial Equity in Policing. And they operate by this thing called Lead with Data, that they're able to answer all kinds of questions because they have the data, and they have a chatted data every month. And it's not used punitively, it's used to help and lift up the conversation so that we're making good strides together and getting people in the right places so that we can address some of these issues. I completely agree with you that it's happening everywhere, but maybe we need to move some of our money into supporting youth programs that keep people busy at night, as opposed to driving around at night, breaking into homes or doing dangerous things. I realize these people might be coming from some other area, but without having that kind of knowledge, we're put in the position of not being able to make good suggestions or make good decisions about our money and our budgets that help you do what it is that you want to do best.
Thank you, Ms. Noble. I certainly appreciate the comments. And if I sounded as though this was a police department against council or against the residents, please do. I don't want that to be the context for the conversation. This is a system I inherited. I cannot just press a button to fix it. This is a system that we purchased in collaboration with AdCom. It is the system we currently have. We were asked by interim city manager Tinklenberg to reach out to the vendor that provides the service. We did that last week. I haven't had an opportunity to report back to him, but they absolutely told us there was no way we would be able to do what other agencies are doing, given the version of the software that we purchased. So our only alternative is to purchase a different software that will allow us to do the things that, quite frankly, I believe we should be doing. I firmly believe that policing ought to be data-led. That is not lost on me. I have the ability to direct staff to take a look at different crime problems as they present themselves. But what I cannot do is provide you with a overarching crime picture of what Commerce City looks like at the push of a button. That requires a concerted effort. And for every data set we pull out of, there is police work that isn't getting done. And so to your point, can we use civilians for that? We certainly could, but I would argue that's inefficient. And quite frankly, the money could be better spent on upgrading our processes.
Could you use some of the 881,000 for getting that data all fixed up?
It's not about the data, ma'am. It's about how the data is warehoused and stored in the system. We purchased a system that we probably shouldn't have. And again, I inherited it. When I took the seat, it is what we were in process of buying, and it was purchased. And unfortunately, this is the system that we have. We certainly have the ability to move away from it, but it will be separate from an AdCom system, which means it would have to be fully supported by Commerce City.
I think what I would like to hear at some point is a solution. That's what I'd really like to hear to resolving this problem, because we're now at the end of a year when we've been talking about it. So if there's something that we can do, please let us know, because that's what this is about. What can we do to help?
Yes, ma'am, I can tell you what you can do. You can authorize me to start looking for a new system. And even if we were to start on that today, that process is going to take about 6 to 8 months. And you're talking about mounds and mounds of data that are going to need to be put into a different system so that we will be able to pull the data out of it. Multiple police departments have it. The agency I came from had it. The money spent up front is well worth it on the back end, so we don't deal with these levels of frustration. Right now, I don't have the ability to fix the system that we currently have. It cannot be done. And that is literally from the mouths of the engineers from the company that we contract with.
So you're suggesting that if we do agree to make, are you looking for an appropriation or what? Because if we don't do it soon, then 8 or 9 months is still further down the road. So whatever we can do to make this easy for you, you just let us know.
Yes, ma'am. Like I said, I haven't had an opportunity to talk to the interim deputy city manager regarding my conversation that we had with the vendor last week. Let me brief him on that tomorrow. And at some point, we'll come back to council with a list of, here's some things we can do and here's the price tag on them.
Okay, thank you very much.
I
Appreciate
also
that.
want to comment that, again, if there are pointed questions that need to be answered, we have the ability to do that. I just can't, we don't have the ability to build a system that will automatically report all of this data out at a time interval. We simply don't have the ability to do that. It needs to be gone inside, hand tallied, reviewed, and literally someone or a few people need to sit and check boxes as to this crime belongs in this category. It's extremely time sensitive for staff, but we can
Do you know where, excuse me, I'm sorry. Do you know where the crimes have occurred in the last month that have involved these vehicles and break-ins?
Yes, ma'am. We did the report that went out in the city manager's report I believe it was last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. We took a look, and that's a report that I built that we're going to be getting monthly about all the auto burglaries along with so I believe, and I don't have that report in front of me, I believe we had something like 60 for the entire city. We averaged about 2 a day. And again, I will tell you, just looking at the data from the rest of the region, and I hate to say this, we were not as bad as some of the other places. One of the things we've discovered in our search for the data and pushing out that report is over 56, almost 60% of those vehicles left their doors unlocked. And criminals are smart. They come back to where the fishing is good. And if we can't get residents to do things as simply as lock their car doors, it's going to be an uphill battle no matter how much data you have. And I've listened to all the arguments on why people don't want to lock their doors because they don't want a window broken. So they would rather them rummage through the car, except now they're going in and they're grabbing remote controls for garage operators and they're going inside of residences. And as you heard the residents speak this evening, on one of those occasions, the bad guys were actually armed and cranked off some rounds. So I do know we've got a plan in place. I'm not at liberty to discuss it, but we are going to be heavily targeting. We've got some things put in place to do some things about the criminal activities that are occurring. But I'd like to caution everybody that's listening and all of you. These are crimes that nobody goes to jail for. We write tickets and we cut them loose. The jail is not taking people at this moment. So our ability to be a deterrent literally will rest with residents doing everything they can to protect themselves.
Then I think we probably need some social media about this to alert people that they really need to take extra steps if they want to protect their goods. Because I worry about people talking about taking law into their own hands. Now, they may just be talking tough on social media, but they will definitely wind up talking about guns and how they think they're going to patrol their neighborhoods and take care of this problem. They don't want to lose their property. I don't want them to lose their lives.
I concur with you 100%. And I would tell any resident that would listen, that's a really poor approach to this problem. Your best instance in almost all of these is to call the police. We have a lot of tools at our disposal. We can get there relatively quickly. We can certainly figure out where stolen equipment is going. And in most cases, we've done a fairly decent job of actually catching them. The problem is once we catch them, we write tickets and we send them home to their parents. And that's usually not going to be a great recipe for preventing these types of crime, particularly when it is lucrative. I mean, I had a conversation with a resident that had hunting rifles stole out of his truck because he left it unlocked. And he actually yelled at staff because he lives in a neighborhood where he feels he shouldn't have to lock his door. That's the sort of mentality that we're dealing with. And if we can't address that as a community, then all of our efforts will go through, they will all be for naught. At some point, residents need to be responsible for doing the right thing. And quite frankly, you should want to lock your stuff up. If you have the ability, park in your garage. Don't leave your iPhone and change and expensive headphones on the car seat. It's a recipe for disaster. But what I can tell you absolutely, with 100% truth, is a lot of these are absolutely preventable. Absolutely preventable. We get great footage from Ring cameras of the suspects. We do great follow-up on all of these, and we put ourselves in a pretty good position to catch them. But that doesn't alleviate the frustration of having your privacy invaded and your personal property taken. By then, the frustration is already done.
Okay, just let us know what we can do. Thank you.
Councilmember Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. We have some scheduling conflicts for the Veterans Commission that came up. Staff failed to look at what other committees and commissions are on what times and what dates. The first meeting is tomorrow. Myself and Craig sit on the Parks and Rec. And to be honest with you, I'm very disappointed because, you know, we all have crazy schedules. We all got elected to serve on these commissions and committees, and for staff not to put out that big old chart we have and say, hey, maybe this is not the right day. It's frustrating, to be honest. But Parks and Recs, me and Craig sit on it, and I wanted to see if someone would want to switch a committee. They're going to meet at Tuesday at 6 o'clock. You know, I was looking forward to sitting on this committee. Super cool applicants that got put on there when we interviewed them. I mean, I think it's going to do some great stuff, but unfortunately, I can no longer sit on that. Would someone want to take my place or switch out something? I'm open. I do sit on the Parks and Rec, Cultural Council, and Youth Commission, which is Tuesdays and Thursdays. When we did the doodle poll, Wednesdays didn't count. I guess I was the only one for Wednesdays. So would someone want to switch commissions or committees so that we could have full representation of City Council on this newly commission or committee?
For people that want to talk in administration. So if there's somebody that wants to sit on the Veterans Commission as a council representative, please use your physical hand. Councilman Madera, so you win the prize.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I'll sit on it.
Thank you.
Councilman Wadiola, did you have anything else?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Next is Councilman Hurst.
Yeah, thank you. So I just got, I have one thing, but real quick, Chief, I remember last year we had a presentation from, I know I'm gonna get the name wrong, but I think it was like the North Metro or the Metro Task Force on Stolen Vehicles. Came with some good data. Seems like we partner with several other Metro agencies in that task force. I'm not specifically asking for the same individual to come back and give us, you know, a 30-minute presentation. But if we could get a summarized version of what they're working on, that may help us. You know, I know when I was purchasing my truck, I made sure it didn't fall within the years that the Ford F-150 gets stolen every night, you know, because there are certain types of cars that we saw through that report that make a lot of sense, whether it's don't leave your car unlocked, or those are cars that somehow easily have a master key out there where people are out there just unlocking your door. I think that in and of itself is just good educational information reminder, if you will, for our constituents to hear, whether that's shared on social media or some other form of communication. Not sure what the best is. I trust staff on that one, but if there's possibility and if we're still part of that task force, I think that might be a good compromise on trying to figure out, what's occurring at this point.
Yes, sir. That is something we absolutely can do. The name of that group is the Colorado Metro Area Metro Auto Theft Task Force. We do participate in that, and they produce a daily report. And you would be literally amazed at the number of vehicles that are stolen daily in Colorado. In addition to that, I also sit on the Colorado Auto Theft Prevention Authority Board as well. This is a problem Colorado's been dealing with for a long time. But let me get with them, and I do know they make some portions of their reporting non-law enforcement sensitive, and I think we would be able to push that information out through the city managers updating on social media. We can absolutely.
Yeah, I think, if I remember right, I was like you. Wow, that's a ton of cars that go missing on an annual basis. But I was also pretty impressed by how many were recovered. And recoveries, in my mind, tend to a greater likeliness of us catching the suspect. So good data just for us to ingest is like, hey, this is like you were saying, it's a kind of statewide problem. Here's how we're addressing it. We're on a team that's attacking it. So I appreciate that. That the conversation that Councilmember Noble had kind of jarred my memory of that presentation. So I thought that might be a good kind of update for us. Appreciate it, Chief. Thank you. The other one's for Roger, real quick. The mayor and I last year had, some, I would call them, preliminary or initial idea discussions about a Havana on-ramp onto I-76. And, part of that discussion revolves around, the $100 million price tag to build an overpass over 104th or over Highway 85 on 104th. That's, let's just say that's nowhere in the near future, whether it's through build or infra grants, going to happen. And so, the idea, coming from the mayor was 104th is not only a Commerce City road, we don't even own that portion of the road, CDOT does, but it's very much a regional transportation road these days, getting out to E470 or getting out to the airport. And so what kind of jarred my memory on this is our discussion about Havana and 8th or 108th today made me look at that area again and go, hey, there may be opportunity. I'm not an engineer, but there may be opportunity for an on-ramp there that's legal to FHWA specs. That's where it kind of gets iffy, but I do know that the bridge going over I-76 does have the width to allow for additional lane usage. It's just, does it comply with FHWA specs? I would love to see if we can entertain that. You might have already, but if we can entertain it with Region 1 at CDOT, and then obviously I just, look at that as a compromise solution to the 104th, Highway 85, I-76, like interchange there. That traffic is projected to be only continue to go up. And so with the, short term of that fix, and then the little bit longer term of actually having an off ramp on 76, which could really ease some of the pains of, at least up north of the train that stops to unload cars right there at 104th and Highway 85 all the time. I know there's other places that are pinch points for the train, but that one would be fantastic if we could give some compromise solutions outside of the $100 million overpass.
Made a note of it. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, thank you. And just speaking along the same lines as safety in the neighborhoods, I wanted an update because we haven't heard anything about when council had approved for the neighborhood watch program to get 5 packets going. Because what's the status of that that I'm aware of? We haven't heard anything, or is it due to staff issues? Because like I said, I think that would help if we get more neighborhood watch programs going within Commerce City, So does someone have an update on that?
There was
Yes,
an
ma'am.
update. There was an update in the planner report that Ms. Peters sent out, I think either last week or the week before, but go ahead, please, Chief.
Yes, thank you, Roger. We do have a brief update. I can tell you the COVID-19 challenges has made this extremely difficult for us. We have residents wanting to plan meetings, and quite frankly, I'm not going to allow staff to attend those. So we've tried to discourage the in-person meetings and perhaps schedule something through Zoom. One of the primary issues that we're having is you will have one or two neighbors that have decided they want to do a neighborhood watch, and that simply is not enough for us to spin the wheels to get this thing started. I am proud to tell you that we do have one that gathered 12 neighbors, I believe in the Dunes, that we'll be reaching out to them next week to get that one started. But we haven't had anybody else complete the actual neighborhood watch process to get it started. So from a funding standpoint, this year is not going to be a problem. We can take care of all the things that Neighborhood Watch requires that we do. The problem that we're having is one or two individuals want to start a Neighborhood Watch and they don't have the ability to get their neighbors on board. And quite frankly, that's a recipe for disaster. The watch won't work without neighborhood involvement. So we do have one. In addition to that, I'm also in discussions with the Public Safety Advisory Board. They want to be a little bit more involved with it. So they're going to be assisting us in getting the one that I previously mentioned up and running. We're just trying to figure out a way that we can do that safely.
So how are the residents being reached out to get involved? I know you can't go door to door or anything, but how are we reaching out to them? Is it on the website?
That is part of the problem. Residents don't have the ability to hang out in the front yard like they used to. And with the colder weather coming, we don't anticipate there'll be a lot of neighboring gathering together. And so quite frankly, they're going to have to use their own social networking platforms to sort of broach the idea. And that's one of the things we're talking about, the Public Safety Advisory Board using their platforms to sort of reach out to residents and provide the guidance around starting a neighborhood watch program. It's just going to take us a little bit to get started. We just have a lot of restrictions in place right now. And again, we're not immune to that. I've got staff members out on COVID. We just got challenges.
Okay. And one last question. I don't know if this is a possibility. Don't know all the police, what all can be done. But a lot of times when someone just simply sees a police car, is there like possibly extra vehicles to park on residential streets, maybe, to help improve and lower the crime rates? Is that a possibility? Like, is there extra cars?
Well, thank you for the question. And that's why I'm here to answer all of the police questions. We are pretty efficient. So we usually don't keep police cars longer than we have to. Once they're out of our inventory, they go to Fleet, and Fleet does a pretty good job of turning those around. We did try that approach in the past, and we ended up with a lot of very damaged vehicles. So unfortunately, people figure out pretty quickly that there's not a cop inside of it, and we ended up getting things literally shot out and stolen and set on fire and all sorts of problems. So we don't want to sort of exasperate that problem, but it is certainly something we can take a look at.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. It's for you again, Chief. Stay put. I heard you answer Councilmember Noble's question earlier about that you're evaluating software. What I was unclear on is if you need a motion from us to move forward, because I'm happy to make a motion to explore that if that's what we need to do.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. I don't think we are there yet. We have some platforms that we've taken a look at, but before I ask for a motion, I really want to be very clear about some of our challenges. And I also want to tell you what you're going to get with a new platform as well as the cost. So before I would ask for any money to be approved for this project, I owe it to Roger and the rest of the executive team to sort of get them briefed up to speed. I have to talk to our IT director. He's the one who's quite frankly going to end up spearheading it. So there are quite a lot of other switches I need to engage before I just ask for money. And
Absolutely.
I would like to be able to do that first.
I appreciate that feedback. I just want to make sure anything we can do to help move it along, we do as a council. And even if that means making it a priority, I don't know if that helps either, but putting a timeline on when that could be done or should be done. Do you have an idea of how long it will take at this point to kind of evaluate and bring something back?
The IT director is probably going to be in the best position to sort of spearhead that, because I simply go, this is what I want, and he takes a look at it and said, this will work in our environment. And so quite frankly, I'm going to overly rely upon our IT director to sort of guide me on that. But what I can tell you is I will bring something back to council on this subject, probably at an administrative session by mid-December, depending upon the dates that we're having meetings.
Excellent. One other thought, because I've been involved in some software installations and data migrations in my professional life as well. And sometimes it just takes more hands to get it done. So, I don't know if contract IT work is something that you would consider in that migration process and the, implementation of new software, but just another thought of, how it could be done maybe quicker if you need to.
Yeah, and again, that's something that I would rely upon our IT director to sort of
say.
He's the professional that will say, we absolutely can get it done. Here's the price tag that's going to be associated with it. And I really would like to give council here's your list of options. Here's your option 1, 2, and 3. Debate it and then make a decision.
Sounds good, Chief. Thanks for the info.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Councilmember Noble.
Chief, I really should have followed up, because I suspect that Mr. Daffron would like to know what deterrents you might be putting in place regarding all of the thefts that are occurring, if any.
There are some things I can't talk about because they're tactically sensitive, and I certainly don't want to put cops at harm's risk. What I can tell you is we have an assortment of plane vehicles, undercovers, and a lot of devices out in the field. That's about it best I can give you right now without compromising what we've got going on. But what I can tell you is there are police officers in your neighborhoods that are working in the middle of the night trying to put a stop to this. Unfortunately, again, and I hate to sound like a broken record, COVID-19 has sort of tapped our staffing a little bit, so we don't have the full assortment of things that we normally would be able to do, but we're using what we have to the best of our ability to sort of make this go away.
Yes.
And again, I agree with, I forget who made the getting residents aware of the things that they can do to protect themselves is probably the most critical piece of that. It certainly would go a long way when checking it. I mean, when a door handle is unlocked, it takes all of 15 seconds, check a handle, get in, grab something, and move on to the next car. That really is problematic.
It is. It is. It wasn't the case in my daughter's situation, but yes, it is for some. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Any other members wishing to raise anything during administrative council business? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports. Mr. Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm planning to take 4 days off, December 1 through 4. So that would be 4 days in the latter part of the week. We have a council meeting on that Monday, and I think tentatively scheduled anyway for a joint meeting with the school board. So didn't plan to take Monday off. Ms. Blakeman would be acting city manager during that time.
Thanks, sir. Enjoy your time off. Mr. Sheasley.
I said enough tonight, so I have nothing to report, but I will just note that you are nearing your 4.5-hour time limit currently, and we have an executive session scheduled. So when we come back to vote on that after the NIGID meeting, you may want to consider if you actually want to do it tonight, or you'll have to do a motion to extend. the meeting.
Thank you. Any other council members wishing to make a report? Seeing none, I have a brief one. I had a web conference with Oakwood Homes, Mr. Lead and Mr. Hayes last week, going over their plans and future over Union and the community build out over here. We had the meeting last week with Tri-County Health and the mayors in the region, and that is all I have for a report. At this time, I'm going to recess us to the NIGID meeting. Excuse me. So I will call that meeting to order and ask the secretary to call the roll.
Chair Huseman,
Present.
Vice Chair Frank,
Present.
Board Member Madera,
Present.
Board Member Alan Thomas,
Present.
Board Member Noble,
Present.
Board Member Wardiola,
Present.
Board Member Hurst,
Present.
Board Member Grimes, Board Member Smith.
Sorry, present. I had a technical challenge.
That's okay.
Present.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, sir. First item on the agenda this evening is public hearing. The public hearing is for ordinance NIGID 177 for inclusion of property located at 10550 Brighton Road. Tonight's public hearing is on the inclusion of that property. At this time, I will open the public hearing and ask if there are any board members that wish for staff to make the presentation. Councilmember Grimes.
Sorry, all kinds of technical trauma, my fault.
Are there any board members that wish to have staff make that presentation? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, has anybody been registered to speak or provided written comments?
Chair Huseman, no members of the public registered to speak on this ordinance, and no written comments were received by the deadline.
Thank you. And are there any questions for staff regarding this item during the public hearing? Seeing none, I will close that public hearing. This time I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce and approve on first reading ordinance NIGID 177. Mayor, Vice Chair.
Motion to introduce and approve on first reading ordinance NIGID 177.
Thank you. Board Member Grimes.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to introduce and approve on first reading ordinance NIGID 177. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Secretary, will you please take a roll call vote?
Board Member Madera,
Yes.
Board Member Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Board Member Noble,
Yes.
Board Member Wardiola,
Yes.
Board Member Hurst,
Yes.
Board Member Grimes,
Yes.
Board Member Smith,
Yes.
Board Vice Chair Frank,
Yes.
Chair Huseman,
Yes.
passes 9-0.
Thank you. At this time, I'm going to adjourn the NIGID meeting and return to the city council meeting and reconvene the city council meeting at this time. Right now we have on the agenda the opportunity for an executive session. Now I'm looking for a motion and a second to enter into said executive session. Councilmember Hurst.
Motion to move towards or move to executive session.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
So if with your indulgence, I'll clean that up a little bit, and we'll have a motion and a second to enter into executive session of the city council with its staff and attorneys pursuant to CRS 24-6-402 (4) (b) to receive legal advice relative to pending and potential litigation. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst.
Apologize, hand still up.
Seeing no request for discussion, we will take a voice vote. All those in favor of going into this said executive session, please show me your physical hands. 1, 2, 3. Oh, we have enough. Looks like it's unanimous. So at this time, the vote is unanimous to go into executive session. The city attorney has circulated a Zoom link. The meeting will adjourn immediately following the executive session, and no further action will be taken by the city council. So I will come back and close out this council meeting whenever we are done with the executive session. Please follow the Zoom link that has been provided to you by Mr. Shaisley to enter into that executive session.
It has not yet been circulated, Mayor. The meeting's going to adjourn automatically at 10:35 tonight, given the NIGID meeting. Does council want to vote on an extension for 30 minutes right now, or just go with that?
Does anybody on council wish to extend the meeting by 30 minutes with a vote now? Councilmember Hurst.
Motion to approve a 30-minute extension if needed for the session we're about to enter.
Thank you. Councilmember Madera.
Second.
You have a motion and a second to authorize the city council to extend their meeting by 30 minutes should it be needed during the executive session. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst.
You're going to kill me by the end of the night. Sorry, man.
Seeing no request for discussion, we will take a show of hands vote. We won't call them a voice vote anymore. We'll just call them show of hands votes. All those in favor of extending the meeting by 30 minutes, please raise your physical hand. And that is going to be unanimous. So we have the option to go an additional 30 minutes, which would put our termination time at 11:05. And still waiting on Mr.
Mayor, yeah, I'm working on that right now. I believe the plan was for the meeting to go offline, and so there wouldn't be any need to come back into the meeting, and we would just record the adjournment time.
Okay.
If that works for you, so nobody sticks around waiting for that eagerly.
That'll work just fine. Those of you at home or watching online, if you did not hear, we are not going to come back into this session. So we will adjourn out of the executive session. So this will conclude the live stream, most likely, of the meeting.